Explore Poirot's Casebook Audio, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot cracks cases in immersive audio stories.
A snowbound Chapter manor. 9. A single gunshot in the dead of night. The night had deepened over Eldridge Manor lies dead. The snowstorm's fury now buried low, in the mournful howl that seemed among the elegant growing dread within. His poised wife, the secretive doctor, the ambitious nephew, the loyal housekeeper, or the innocent niece. The air thick with the aftermath of Clara's tearful Poirot's little gray cells unravel a web of lies, his small frame radiating and unshakable the snow stood before the assembled guests. Step into the chilling his green eyes gleaming with the intensity of a man who saw the puzzle's pieces where every clue whispers betrayal and the truth is colder than the grave. Near the hearth felt his pulse Chapter 1. Sensing the frost Poirot was poised to spring a trap, the snow fell in his soft, relentless mind, ready to unravel the tangle of lies and cloaking the world in a hush that seemed to whisper secrets to those who would listen. Their faces pale and strange, Eldridge sat in a tense semicircle. A grand Jacobean pile of weathered stone and ivy stood resolute against the December Sir Rowland Eldridge, his hands clenched into fists, aglow, stood by the mantel, his eyes darting between Poirot and his weeping within its walls. A gathering, her handkerchief sodden, a festive reunion of the Eldridge family, and a shadow in the corridor orchestrated by the widow Lady Beatrice Eldridge, whose violet Eldridge tradition was matched only by her unyielding sense of propriety, whose nervous fidgeting with Captain Arthur Hastings, lately returned from a tiresome journey in London, stamped the snow from his boots. Mr. Theodore Grayson, the solicitor, sat rigid, his gaze fixed on Poirot as though anticipating a blow. Miss Evelyn Warwick, her calm facade cracked glass watched with unblinking and dominated the space. Mr. Julian Harrow, the playwright, leaned forward, his sardonic air replaced by a flicker of strains of a carol, as though sensing the drama's climax approaching. Hastings, ever the Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking on the oak floor, his voice clear and deliberate, though his thoughts were soon interrupted by the arrival of his old friend Hercule Poirot. We stand at the precipice of truth. Impeccable in a tailored Lady Beatrice's polished shoes emerged from the flurry tapestry of deception, his mustache gleaming with a precision that defied the weather, the slipper, the smudged letter, the scuff mark, the blue wool, and now Madame green Clara's shadow beneath the brim of his hat. They point to a truth. It is a scene in most charming, is it not? Tonight, yet I confess there is not with force, but with the pressure of the mind. No, for the guilty cannot resist the weight of their own, though tracing an invisible thread of unease. Roland's voice was sharp, chuckled, almost desperate. You're imagining a trap, Poirot. What are you playing at, Poirot? Gathering. My mother is gone, and you're staging theatrics instead of finding her. Poirot's lips twitched, and Poirot's mustache twitched, his gaze unwavering. But the heart of man Hastings, it is a labyrinth. No, even in the glow of festivity, the shadows of motive linger. They are like a spring under tension. The guests, an eclectic assembly of relations and acquaintances, were gathered. Let us review the facts and see who flinches. A fire roared in the grate. He turned to the group. His Lady Beatrice, a formidable woman of 60, the open window with no tracks in the snow suggests Lady Beatrice did not lead the manor group with the air of a general inspecting. A single drop was meant to mislead her son, Sir Rowland Eldridge. Violence, where a man of 40 with a perpetually furrowed brow left alone speaks of haste by the mantel, nursing a glass of brandy, letter, the scuff mark, his wife Clara, a delicate beauty with nervous hands. These are not accidents, but signs of intent. Her eyes darting toward the door, and the shadow Madame Clara saw moving toward the passage after 11. The younger generation was represented by Roland's cousin Violet. Clara's breath hitched. Her vivacious woman of 25. I told you I didn't see who it was. It was just a shadow, I swear. Fiancé, Dr. Martin Poirot's eyes softened, a reserved tone remained with a habit of adjusting his spectacles. A shadow. But shadows are cast by Theodore Grayson, a solicitor and old friend of the family, whose jovial demeanor belied a shrewd gaze, and Miss Evelyn Warwick, the key, Lady Beatrice's companion. We
a
shall
quiet
explore
woman
it
of
together
indeterminate
now and
age,
see
whose
what
plain
secrets
attire
it
contrasted
holds.
with her sharp, observant
Simmons,
eyes.
pale but composed, nodded
The
and
final
left the
guest,
room,
introduced with a
returning
flourish by
moments
Lady
later with a
Beatrice,
heavy brass
was
key.
Mr. Julian Harrow,
The
a playwright
guests
of some
exchanged
renown,
uneasy glances,
whose
their
latest work
silence
had
heavy
caused a
with
stir in
anticipation.
London's theatrical circles. Poirot led the way. The
His
group
presence,
following in
it
a
seemed,
reluctant
was a
procession
coup
for
to
the
the
manor's
service
Christmas
passage
and
and
down to the
festivities.
cellar door. Though his sardonic
The air
smile
grew
suggested
colder,
he found the
the dim
gathering
light
more
casting
amusing
eerie
than
shadows on the
enchanting. Stone walls. As the evening
Poirot
progressed,
unlocked
the
the door,
conversation
revealing a
flowed
cavernous
with the
cellar
ease
lined
of
with
long
dusty wine
acquaintance.
racks and crates.
Though Hastings
The
noted
air
a
thick with
certain
the
scent of
brittleness
mildew
beneath
and
the
old
oak.
pleasantries. He moved with
Lady
purpose.
Beatrice spoke
His
of the
magnifying
family's
glass
legacy,
catching
her
the
voice
faint
light
light
as
as
he
he
examined
examined
the
the
floor.
floor. While Roland brooded over the
Hastings,
estate's finances, he said, pointing to a faint trail in the dust barely visible. Doctor. Crane about his devotion to his patient not long ago, flushed to his cheeks. Another sliver of blue regaled the group with tales of legal triumphs. Heart raced, though his eyes lingered on Clara's anxious figure. Someone was here, moving Poirot, seated in a high-backed chair, observed the scene with the intensity of a painter studying his canvas. And I suspect we are close to the heart of this mystery. His head tilted slightly, his voice absorbed every gesture. Mesdames et messieurs, this cellar is a stage, and someone has played a part to his friend's methods. Who among you can explain was already cataloging the nuances of the room? Speak now, or the truth will speak. The way Violet's laughter faltered, Violet's voice mentioned the family trust. It wasn't me. The way Clara's I was in my room with Martin, I swear it. The way
Crane
Mr.
nodded,
Harrow's eyes narrowed at the mention of a recent scandal. I don't know anything
Dinner
about
was a
this
lavish
cellar.
affair,
Served
Clara's
in the
aunt
oak
shook
panel
her
dining
voice
room.
barely
Audible. The table
I
groaned
told you I
under
saw
the
a
weight
shadow,
of roast
but I
pheasant,
didn't follow it. I was
glazed
afraid.
vegetables, and a towering
face
face
darkened.
Yet the atmosphere was strained. You're accusing us
Lady
all
Beatrice
based on
at the head of
scraps
the
and
table
shadows. Steered the conversation
Poirot's
with
gaze
practiced
shifted
ease,
to Grayson,
whose
but
rigidity
Hastings
betrayed
noted
his
the
unease.
undercurrents.
Roland's curt responses, Clara's
secrets.
distracted
Did Lady
silences,
Beatrice
and
ever
Violet's
speak of the
forced
cellar,
gaiety, of its uses? Poirot, ever the
Grayson's
connoisseur
voice
of
was
human
clipped.
nature, ate
Never.
sparingly. It's for
His
wine
attention
and storage,
fixed on
the
nothing
interplay
more.
of personalities. I had no reason to come here. As the clock struck 10,
Poirot
a sudden
turned to Miss
gust
Warwick,
rattled
whose
the
composure
windows,
seemed
and the lights
afraid.
flickered briefly. Mademoiselle Warwick, Miss Warwick, you were
gasped,
closest
her hand
to Lady
clutching her
Beatrice,
napkin,
and Mr. Harrow
Did she
made
mention
a
this
jest
place
about
or any
ghostly
plan to hide
visitations,
something,
though no
or
one
someone?
laughed. Evelyn's
Lady
hands
Beatrice
clenched,
rose,
her
her
voice
expression
steady but
unreadable.
strained.
She
The
never
storm
spoke
grows
of
fierce,
this
cellar, she said. Her concerns were
We
the
shall
trust
retire
the family,
early, I
she
think.
was. Tomorrow we shall have
Protective,
games
but
and
secretive.
carols, a proper Christmas. Harrow silent. Until now,
The guests
dispersed to their rooms, their footsteps echoing in the vast This feels like one of my plays, Monsieur Poirot. Hastings, sharing a glance with Poirot, felt a dust very theatrical, but what's the motive?
Nothing
Money,
amiss,
revenge,
surely.
he ventured. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Motive, Monsieur
Amiss,
Arrow, is the
Hastings?
key. The trust,
Perhaps
the
not
old
yet.
wounds, the debts, but the stage
They
is
swirl
set,
around
this
this
the
house
players
like
are
the
in their
snow
places.
outside.
It is only a matter
And
of
now
time before the
we shall
curtain
apply
rises. The final pressure. In his
He
room,
turned to the group,
Hastings
his
lay
voice
awake,
rising.
the wind
I
howling
propose a
outside.
reconstruction.
He thought
shall
of reenact
Poirot's
the night's
words,
events here
of
in
the
the labyrinth
manor.
of the human heart.
Each of you will
and
take
wondered
your
what
place
shadows
as you were
lurked in the
after
warmth
dinner.
of Eldridge Manor. The shadow it
The
will
snow
move
continued
again,
to
and
fall,
we shall see,
blanketing
blanketing
the
the world
it.
in silence, and
A
somewhere
collective
in the
gasp
house filled the
a
cellar.
clock
ticked
and
toward
Clara's
an
sob
unseen
broke
reckoning.
the
silence. The night
Roland's
passed face
uneventfully,
flushed
or
with
so
anger,
it
but
seemed.
Violet's eyes widened
At dawn,
with fear.
a scream shattered
Crane's
the stillness,
spectacles
piercing
slipped,
the
and
heavy
Grayson's
air
jaw
of the manor.
tightened. Warwick's gaze remained fixed on Poirot,
stumbled
while
into the
Harrow's
corridor
lips
where he
curved in a
found
faint,
Violet,
uneasy
her face
smile.
ashen, her hands
Poirot
trembling.
continued undeterred. It's Lady Beatrice. We shall begin
she
at 10:30 when Lady
She's-
Beatrice retires. She's gone. Monsieur Simmons, you
Hastings
will lock the
hurried
doors
to the
as you
master
did.
bedroom,
where the
The
door
rest
stood
will
go
ajar.
to your places. Roland to the
The
room
study
was
frigid.
Violet and Crane
The
to
window
the library,
open to the
Grayson
storm.
and Harrow to the billiard room. Lady Beatrice's bed
Clara
was
and
empty, the
Warwick to
covers
your
thrown
rooms.
back, and a single
I shall
slipper lay
watch.
abandoned on
And
the
the
floor.
truth.
It will reveal itself. The other guests gathered, their
The
faces
guests a mix
hesitated,
of
their
shock
faces a
and
mix of
suspicion,
dread and
Dr.
resignation.
Crane,
Kneeling by
Poirot's
the
authority
bed, shook
brooked
his head
no
gravely.
refusal. As there's no sign of assigned places, Hastings drew Poirot
as though
aside.
she
vanished into the snow.
You're taking a risk,
Poirot, arriving last,
What if the guilty
party
doesn't take
with a calm
the bait?
that belied the gravity of the
Poirot's
Poirot's smile was serene. His eyes lingered on the open window.
The
guilty cannot resist
beyond,
the stage when
and
the
the
faint smear of
spotlight is
red
upon
on the
them.
sill.
The
The trap
detail
so
is
small
set,
it might have been
and the
overlooked.
shadow
will move again.
Mon Dieu, he
The
murmured.
manor's
His voice
corridors
soft
echoed
but
with
resolute.
footsteps as the guests took
The
their
game.
places, the firelight
It has
casting
begun.
long, wavering shadows. Hastings, his heart pounding,
Poirot
knew that
stood in the
Poirot's
service
little gray
passage,
cells,
his
were
eyes
already
fixed
at
on the
work,
door to Lady
unraveling
Beatrice's
the threads
room.
of a mystery
His
that
little
promised
gray
to be as
cells
intricate
humming with
as it was
anticipation.
chilling. The
The
snow
snow
outside
continued
fell
to fall,
silently,
sealing
the manor in a
secrets.
cocoon of white. But within its walls,
trap
a
was
shadow
closing.
of malice stirred, and the truth was about to
Chapter
step into
2.
the light. The Vanishing Lady.
Chapter
10. The morning
reveal.
light, pale and watery,
The snow-laden
filtered through
night
the snow
pressed
heavily
heavily
against
against
Eldridge Manor,
casting
its
a ghostly
ghostly
silence
pallor,
over
stark
Eldridge
contrast to the
Manor.
electric tension
The
within.
scream
that had shattered the
dawn
drawing room
lingered in the
dimly lit
minds
by
of
the
the
dying
guests,
embers of
who
the
now
fire.
stood huddled
was
in
a
the corridor
stage set
outside
for the
Lady
climax of
Beatrice's
Hercule's
bedroom.
Poirot's
Their
meticulously
faces
orchestrated
varying
varying
trap.
degrees of shock. The
Fear
guests,
and
their faces
suspicion.
pale and drawn,
The air was
had
heavy with the
returned
scent
from their
of damp
damp
wool
wool
and
and the
wax
previous
polish,
night's
and
movements.
the wind,
still
their
fierce,
nerves frayed by
howled
the
through
weight
the
of
open window,
suspicion,
carrying
and
flakes of
Poirot's
snow that
unrelenting
melted upon the
scrutiny.
polished floorboards. Captain Hastings,
Hercule
standing by the
Poirot,
window,
his
felt
small
his
frame
frame
immaculate
immaculate as he
despite
watched
the
Poirot
hour,
stood at the
whose
threshold
small
of the
frame
bedroom,
radiated an
his eyes
unshakable
sweeping the
authority.
scene with the precision
His
of
green
a
eyes
watchmaker,
gleaming
with the certainty of a
Captain
man
Hastings
who had
at his
unraveled
side
the knot
felt
of
a
a familiar
complex
mix of
mystery.
awe and impatience as
The
Poirot's
guests
gaze
sat in a
lingered
tense
on
semicircle,
details that
their
seemed
earlier
to the
facades of
untrained
composure
eye shattered, utterly inconsequential. Roland Eldridge,
The angle
his
of
hands
the open
clenched,
window,
stared at Poirot
the
with
precise
a mix of placement of the
defiance and
slipper
dread.
and the faint smear
Clara,
of red on
his
the
wife,
sill, now
sat
confirmed
hunched,
to be
her
blood,
tear-streaked
though
face
barely
buried
more
in her
than a
handkerchief.
droplet.
Mon
Violet
ami,
Eldridge, her
Poirot
defiance
said
reduced
softly,
to a
turning to
flicker,
Hastings.
clung to Dr. Martin
Observe the
Crane,
room.
whose
It is a
spectacles
stage,
no longer
and every
slipped.
prop
His
tells a
gaze
story.
fixed on Poirot
But
with
what
wary
story
anticipation.
precisely does it tell?
Mr. Theodore
Hastings,
Grace,
peering into the
sat
bedroom,
rigid,
saw
his
only
eyes darting
chaos.
nervously. The bedclothes in
Miss
disarray,
Evelyn
the
Warwick,
window
her
flung
calm
wide,
facade
and the
cracked,
absence of Lady
watched
Beatrice,
Poirot with
whose
unblinking
unblinking
intensity.
intensity had dominated the previous
Mr. Julian
evening.
Harrow, the playwright, leaned forward,
It
his
looks
sardonic
like
air
she was
replaced by a
taken,
quiet
he
alertness,
ventured,
as though sensing
or
the curtain
perhaps
about
she
to
fled
fall.
in the night.
Poirot's
rose,
mustache twitched,
his
a
movements
sign of
deliberate
mild disapproval.
his voice clear and resonant.
Fled?
Non, Hastings.
Mesdames et
Lady
messieurs,
Beatrice was not a woman to
began.
flee and take. The disappearance of
By
Lady
whom and
Beatrice
how
is
through
a
a
puzzle
snowstorm
no
that
longer.
has sealed this
the
manor
clues,
tighter than a
the
drum.
open window, the drop of blood,
No,
the
we must
solitary
consider the
slipper,
facts,
the smudged
not the
letter, the
fancies.
scuff mark, the
blue wool,
summoned
and the
by
shadow
Violet
seen by
scream
Madame
crowded
Clara,
the doorway, have
their
led
voices
us
to
to the
murmur
truth
of speculation.
Tonight in our reenactment,
Sir Roland,
the
his
guilty
face
could
pale
not
and
resist
drawn,
the pressure of
clutched
their
the
own
door
frame as though
functions.
it might anchor him to reality.
The trap,
it has sprung.
Mother can't just
and
be
the
gone,
truth it is
he said,
revealed.
his voice hoarse.
A
This is
collective
absurd.
gasp filled the room,
There
and
must be
Roland's
some
voice broke the
explanation.
silence, sharp with desperation.
Clara, his
wife, stood close. Her
Enough
delicate
games,
features pinched
Poirot.
with anxiety. Tell us what happened to my mother. Perhaps she wandered outside. Poirot's mustache
storm.
twitched, his gaze steady. She might be lost
Patience,
in it, Monsieur Eldridge.
Her voice trembled,
The
and she
truth was
twisted
like
her
a
wedding
fine
ring,
wine. It
a
must
habit
be
Hastings
savored,
had noted
not
the
gulped.
night before.
Let us
Violet,
walk through
still
the
shaken,
events,
clung
step
to
by
Dr.
step
Martin
and
Crane,
see
who
how
patted
the
her
pieces
arm
fit.
awkwardly.
His spectacles slipping
paced
down
his
slowly
nose.
before the fire, his
I
hands
checked the
clasped
grounds
behind
as
his
best
back.
I could,
he said. The open window with
The
no
snow
tracks
is
in the
undisturbed
snow
beyond
was
the
a
window,
deception.
no footprints, no
A
tracks.
red herring to suggest Lady Beatrice
Impossible.
left the manor when in fact she
Mr.
never
Theodore
did.
Grayson, the solicitor, rubbed his
The
hands
blood on the
together,
sill,
his
a
joviality
single
replaced
drop was
by a
not
grim
from
frown.
violence but a deliberate mark.
This is most
perhaps
irregular.
from a pinprick.
Lady
mislead
Beatrice
us.
was in fine health. She wouldn't simply
slipper
vanish. We
left
must
alone
search the
was a
house,
sign
every
of
room,
staging
every
for
cupboard.
Lady Beatrice, a woman of order,
Miss
would
Evelyn
not
Warwick,
leave
the
half
companion,
shod.
stood apart,
The
her plain
smudged
face
letter written in
unreadable,
haste,
but her eyes
suggested
darting
an
from one
interruption,
guest
a
to
moment
another,
of crisis,
as though cataloging
the
their
scuff
reactions.
mark in blue wool in the service passage.
Mr.
and
Julian
cellar
Harrow,
pointed
the
to
playwright,
movement,
leaned against
to
the
something
wall,
or someone
his
being
sardonic
hidden,
smile replaced
and the shadow
by a
Madame
thoughtful
Clara
frown.
saw moving toward the
A
passage after
disappearance
11
in a
was the
snowbound
key.
manner, he murmured.
Clara's sobs
It's
broke
like
the
something
silence
out
in
of one of
Poirot's
my
eyes,
plays,
softened
only less
briefly.
amusing. Poirot
Madame,
raised a hand, silencing
your
the
confession
chatter.
was the crack in the facade.
Mesdames et messieurs,
You saw a shadow,
your concern is noted, but
silent.
speculation without evidence
That
is
shadow,
like a ship
it was
without
not
a
a
ghost,
rudder.
but a person with intent.
We shall proceed methodically.
And tonight,
First,
in our
we
reenactment,
establish
that
the facts.
person moved again.
Dr. Crane,
He turned to the group, his
you
voice
say the
rising.
snow is undisturbed?
Let us reconstruct
nodded.
the night.
I looked out the window
Lady
and walked
Beatrice
the perimeter as
retired
far
at
as the
10:30,
terrace,
attended by
The snow is
Mademoiselle
pristine,
Warwick.
save for our
At
own
11,
tracks from
Monsieur
last
Simmons
night's arrival.
locked the doors and windows.
And the blood?
Yet
Poirot
by
asked,
dawn,
pointing to the
the
sill.
window was open and
Crane
Lady
hesitated.
Beatrice was gone.
The passage
Minimal.
was used as the
The
scuff
scratch
mark and
perhaps,
wool attest, and the
not
cellar
enough to
door
suggest
bore
violence.
the same traces, but
Poirot's
why?
eyes gleamed. To
A
hide
scratch,
a body,
you say.
perhaps, or
Yet
to
even a
stage a
scratch may speak
disappearance.
volumes.
Poirot's
And the
gaze
window
settled on Miss
Why
Warwick,
was it
whose
open,
hands clenched in,
in
her
such
lap?
a storm?
Mademoiselle
Lady Beatrice,
Warwick,
you were
was a
Lady
woman
Beatrice's
of order,
shadow, her confidant.
She would not
You
invite the
spoke of her
cold without
preoccupation,
reason.
her talk of
The group
betrayal
fell
and
silent,
old wounds,
their gazes shifting uneasily.
But you knew more.
Poirot
Did you
turned
not?
to the butler, Mr.
You
Simmons.
knew of her plan to
a
alter
stooped
the
man
trust
with
to
a face
exclude
like
someone
weathered
who had
parchment,
betrayed her trust
who
long
had
ago.
appeared silently at the
Evelyn's
edge
face
of the group,
paled,
her voice steady but strained.
Monsieur Simmons, when
I
did you
told
last
you
see
she was
Lady
secretive.
Beatrice? She mentioned
Last
fairness,
night,
nothing
sir.
more. Simmons replied,
Poirot's
his voice
eyes
steady
gleamed.
despite the tension.
Non, mademoiselle.
After dinner, around
You
10:30,
knew of a letter.
She
Not the
retired to her
smudged
room
note
as
on
she
her
always
desk,
did,
but another hidden.
I locked the
addressed
main
to her
doors at 11,
solicitor,
as is my
outlining
custom,
changes
checked
to
the
the
windows.
trust.
All
A
were
letter
secure.
that would disinherit
And
Sir
this
Roland,
window,
whose debts threatened
Poirot
the
gestured
estate
to the
in
open
favor of
casement.
Mademoiselle
Simmons
Violet,
flushed.
whom Lady Beatrice saw
It was
as the
closed,
future.
sir, I'm certain of it.
Roland leapt to his feet, his
Poirot
face flushed
nodded
with
his
rage.
expression
That's a
unreadable.
lie. My mother
Bon.
would never do that.
Then we have a timeline.
Poirot raised
Lady
a hand,
Beatrice was
silencing
seen
him.
at 10:30, and by
But she
dawn
did,
she is
monsieur.
gone with a window
And you
open and a
suspected
drop of blood.
The letter
as our
it was
only
never
witness.
sent, but it was written.
We shall
and
search the
Mademoiselle
house
Warwick
as Monsieur
knew of it.
Grayson suggests.
She
but
was
with
loyal
care.
to Lady Beatrice.
Nothing
but loyalty
must be disturbed.
It can become a burden.
The search was organized
When Lady
with
Beatrice
Poirot's
confided her
characteristic
plan
precision.
and set in motion a chain
Hastings
of events.
was tasked with
He
examining
turned to
the
the
upper
group,
floors
his voice
alongside
relentless.
Violet and Dr. Crane.
The shadow Madame
Roland
Clara
and
saw
Clara
was
searched
Mademoiselle
the ground
Warwick.
floor. Moving to the passage to
Grayson
retrieve
and
the
Harrow
letter,
took the
to
servants'
protect
quarters
Lady
and Miss
Beatrice's
Warwick at
wishes,
Poirot's
or
request,
perhaps to
remained
use it
with
for
him to
her own
recount
ends.
Lady Beatrice's habits
But
and
something went
routines.
wrong. Lady Beatrice
Hastings
described
climbed
the
the
grand
grand
staircase.
staircase.
He couldn't shake the
There
sense
was
of
a
unease
struggle,
that clung to
not
the manor
violent,
like the
but
snow
enough to cause a
outside.
scratch, a drop of
Violet
blood.
walking beside him
And
was
then
subdued.
A
Her
decision
earlier
was
vivacity
made
replaced
to
by
make
a
Lady
nervous
Beatrice
energy. disappear. Violet's
It's
voice
horrible.
trembled. She whispered,
You're saying Evelyn
Aunt Beatrice
killed
was
her?
so commanding. Poirot shook
Who
his
could
head.
do this to
No,
her?
mademoiselle, not
Dr.
killed.
Crane adjusted
Hidden.
his spectacles, his voice
Lady
low.
Beatrice is alive,
We
and
don't
she is
know
in
that
this
anyone did
manor.
anything.
The cellar
She
it
might
was
have
the
fallen
perfect
ill,
place
wandered
to
off.
conceal her.
In this
Bound
weather?
and
Violet
silent
snapped.
until the storm
And with no
passed
footprints?
and a new plan
Don't be
could
absurd,
made.
Martin.
Hastings,
A cry
ever the
erupted from
peacemaker,
Clara,
and
intervened.
Roland's face drained of color.
Let's focus on the search.
Grayson's jaw
Poirot
dropped
will sort
and
it out.
Crane's
He always
spectacles
does.
glinted with shock. The upper
Harrow
floors
leaned
revealed
forward,
nothing.
his eyes wide,
Guest
as
rooms
Warwick's composure
pristine,
shattered, her
closets
hands
empty of
trembling.
anything but linens and mothballs.
Poirot continued, his voice
The
calm
attics,
but
dusty
unyielding.
and cold, held only trunks of
Tonight,
forgotten heirlooms.
in our reenactment,
By
Mademoiselle
noon, the
Warwick
search parties
moved again to
reconvened
check
in the
on her
drawing
charge.
room, their faces grim.
I watched and I
No
saw.
trace of Lady
The
Beatrice
cellar door
had
it
been
was
found.
opened, and the trail
Not
in
a
the
scarf,
dust led
not
to
a
a hidden
footprint,
alcove
not a
where
clue
Lady
beyond the
Beatrice
blood
lies
in the open
alive
window.
but weak.
Poirot, seated
He
by
turned
the
to
fire,
Simmons.
listened to the reports
Monsieur
with a calm
Simmons,
that
fetch
Hastings
the
found
housekeeper.
maddening.
We shall go to the cellar
Nothing,
now, and we shall
Roland
find
said,
her.
his voice tight. The group followed
Not a
in
damn
stunned
thing.
silence. It's
Their
as if she
footsteps
dissolved into
echoing
thin
in the
air.
dim passage.
Clara, pale
In
and
the
trembling,
cellar,
clutched a
Poirot led
handkerchief.
them to an alcove
What do we do
behind
now?
a stack of
Call the
crates
police?
where Lady Beatrice
Poirot
lay
raised a
bound
hand.
and gagged,
The
her
police,
eyes
they will
wide
come,
with
but
relief
the snow
and
has made the
exhaustion.
roads impassable.
Clara sobbed
now,
and Violet rushed
we
to
are
her
our own
side
investigators.
while Roland stood frozen.
Mademoiselle Warwick,
face a
you
mask
knew
of
Lady
shock.
Beatrice best.
Poirot turned to Warwick, whose
Tell
face
me
was
of her
ashen.
habits.
Her
Mademoiselle,
enemies,
you acted
her
out of
secrets,
loyalty, but also fear.
Evelyn Warwick's eyes
You feared
flickered,
Lady
but her voice was
Beatrice's
steady.
plan would tear the family
She
apart.
was a
and
private
you sought
woman,
to delay
Monsieur
it,
Poirot,
to hide her
devoted
until
to the
reason
estate,
prevailed.
to tradition. She had no
But
enemies,
you
but
underestimated the power
she was
of
strict.
truth.
Not everyone approved of her
Warwick's voice
decisions
broke,
about
tears
the
streaming
family
down her
trust.
face.
Roland
I
stiffened,
didn't mean harm.
and Clara's hand
I
froze
wanted
on
to
her
protect
handkerchief.
her, to protect them all.
Violet
the
glanced
trust,
at
the
Doctor.
family. It was
Crane, who
everything
looked
to
away.
her. Grayson
I
coughed, and Harrow's
I
lips
thought I
curved
could
in
make
a
her
faint,
see
unreadable
reason.
smile.
Poirot's gaze
Poirot
softened, but
nodded,
his
his
voice
finger
remained
steepled.
firm. The trust,
Reason,
you say,
mademoiselle, does
a
not
motive,
justify
perhaps.
deception.
Money, it is the
You
root
will
of many
answer for
evils,
this, no?
but for now, Lady
And yet,
Beatrice is
we must
safe.
not leap to conclusions. The blood,
As
the
the
window,
housekeeper
the absence
tended
of
to
tracks.
Lady Beatrice.
These are the
guests
facts.
stood in stunned
The rest,
silence.
it is
The weight
speculation.
of the truth settling
But
over
fear
them.
not, mes amis.
Hercule
Hastings,
Poirot does
watching
not
Poirot,
speculate.
marveled at the little
He observes,
Belgian's
he
genius.
deduces, he reveals.
His ability to see
As the
through the
guests
fog of
dispersed to lunch
lies
and
to
their
the heart
appetites
of the
dulled by
mystery.
dread, Hastings lingered. The snow outside continued
What do you make
to
of it,
fall,
Poirot?
but within the manor the
It's
storm
uncanny.
of secrets
No
had
tracks,
broken,
no
and the
sign
true
of
struggle
last
shone
Poirot's
clear.
eyes gleamed with a quiet
Chapter
intensity.
11.
The
Uncanny,
reflection,
perhaps, but not
the
impossible.
snowstorm that had held Eldridge
truth,
Manor in
Hastings,
its
it
icy
hides
grip
in the
began to
details.
relent as the first
smear of
light of
blood,
dawn
the open
crept
window,
through the
the
silence
mullions
of
of
the
windows,
snow,
casting a pale
Someone
glow
in this
over
house
the
knows
drawing
more
room.
than they say.
The fire
And
now
I,
reduced to
Hercule
glowing
Poirot, will
embers,
find
offered
little warmth to the gathered
wind
guests,
howled, the snow
whose
fell,
faces
and the
bore
manor
the
seemed
marks
to
of
close in
exhaustion,
upon
relief,
itself and lingering
a
unease.
fortress of secrets waiting to be
Lady
unlocked
Beatrice,
by the
frail
little
but
Belgian
resolute,
detective,
sat
with
in
a
a
formidable
high-backed
mind.
chair, a blanket draped
Chapter
over her
3.
shoulders, her iron gray
The
hair
detective
disheveled,
arrives.
but her eyes sharp.
The
with
snow
fire of
continued its
survival.
relentless descent.
Hercule
Shrouding
Poirot,
Eldridge
his
Manor
small
in a
frame
cocoon of
impeccable,
white that
despite seemed
the
to
long
mock the
night,
turmoil
stood before
within.
the group.
His green
By
eyes
midday, the
reflecting
atmosphere
a
in the
quiet
drawing room had
satisfaction.
grown oppressive.
The
Captain
guests'
Hastings,
faces
seated
drawn
near
with
the
the
hearth,
mixture of
felt a
grief and
profound
unease.
sense of awe at his friend's
The absence
genius,
of Lady Beatrice,
tempered
so
by the weight of
commanding
the
the
human
presence
frailties
the previous
exposed
evening,
in the
left a
unraveling
void
of the
that
mystery.
no amount of forced conversation
guests,
could fill.
their nerves frayed by the night's
The fire
revelation,
crackled in the
sat in a
grate,
subdued
but its warmth
semicircle
did little to dispel the chill
Sir
of
Roland
suspicion
Eldridge,
that hung over the
his
gathering. earlier anger replaced by a
Hercule
hollow
Poirot,
fatigue,
seated
stood
in a
by his
high-backed
mother's
armchair,
side,
his hand
surveyed
resting
the room with his
protectively on her
characteristic
chair.
calm.
Clara,
His green
wife,
eyes
sat
sharp
with her hands
beneath the
clasped,
brim of his
her
neatly
tear-streaked
brushed hat,
face a mixture
which
of
he had
relief
not yet
and guilt.
removed. Violet
Captain
Eldridge,
Hastings,
her
standing by the window,
but
watched
tempered
the snow
by
pile
sobriety,
higher
sat
against the
beside
panes,
Dr.
his
Martin
thoughts
Crane,
racing.
whose spectacles no longer
The
slipped.
impossibility
His
of Lady
gaze,
Beatrice's
steady but
disappearance,
subdued,
gnawed at him.
No
Mr. Theodore
footprints,
Grayson,
no
the
signs of
solicitor,
struggle, only
sat
that
with his
cryptic
head
smear
bowed
of
as
blood
though
on the
wrestling
sill.
with his own complicity.
He turned
in
to
the family's
Poirot, who was
tensions.
adjusting his gloves with
Miss Evelyn
meticulous
Warwick,
care.
her composure shattered,
Poirot,
sat apart.
Hastings ventured,
her hands
"You've been
trembling
awfully
in her lap.
quiet. Surely
Her
you've
eyes
formed
fixed
some
on the
theory
floor.
by now."
Poirot's
Mr.
mustache
Julian
twitched
Harrow,
a faint
the
smile,
playwright,
playing at the
leaned
corners
back,
of his mouth.
his sardonic
A
air
theory,
softened
Hastings?
by a newfound
No,
respect
no.
for Poirot's methods.
Theories are for the impatient.
Poirot paced
I
slowly.
observe, I
His
listen,
polished
I
shoes
arrange the
clicking
facts
softly
in my
on the
mind.
oak floor.
The theory
His
will
voice
come
calm
when the facts
and measured.
permit it. For now, we must
Mesdames
gather
et
more.
messieurs, he began.
Much more.
The mystery of
The
Lady
guests, summoned by
Beatrice's
Poirot's
disappearance,
request,
solved,
filtered back
not by chance
into the
or
drawing
force,
room after a subdued
but by the
luncheon.
meticulous application of
Sir
the
Roland
little grey
Eldridge,
cells,
his brow furrowed deeper than
the
ever,
truth
stood
is
by
a
the
delicate
mantel,
thing revealed only
his hands
when the lies
clasped
are stripped
behind his
away.
back.
Tonight
Clara,
we
his
have
wife,
seen the
sat
heart
on
of
the
this
sofa,
manor laid
her
bare, delicate frame
its
hunched
secrets,
as though
its motives,
shielding
its
herself
betrayal
from an unseen threat. Lady
Lady Beatrice, her voice weak Violet Elder spoke for the first time since her rescue, but not extinguished, perched on the arm of a chair. I owe you my life. Her fiancé, but Dr. Martin Crane, at her side, his spectacles glinting in the firelight. Poirot's mustache Mr. Theodore Grayson, his gaze softening as he turned near the bookcase, his joviality replaced by a restless Mademoiselle energy. Warwick acted out of a misguided loyalty, Lady Beatrice's fear that your decision to alter the trust would fracture the family you held her eyes watchful. She believed Julian Rhind-Tutt, the playwright, leaned against she could delay the inevitable, his persuade you to reconsider by a flicker of curiosity. It was not malice, but desperation. Poirot rose, a desire to preserve commanding the room's attention with an authority that belied his size, tears streaming down her face. Mesdames et messieurs, hurt you, Beatrice. He began, his voice you spoke of changing the trust. Of cutting Roland out because of his debts is a puzzle, of giving Violet more to secure the future. But Hercule Poirot does not shrink from puzzles. The division. We shall proceed with method, with order. If I could talk each of you away from the others, you'd see reason. From the moment dinner never meant for it to go so far until the scream of Roland's face darkened, but his voice was steady. Every detail, however small, and you didn't tell me, is of consequence. Evelyn's eyes met his, filled with a murmur rippled through the group. I could, but none dared protest. Beatrice trusted me. Poirot's reputation, though not universally known in this remote corner of Yorkshire, Poirot raised a hand, silencing the silenced objection. The motives, they are complex. He turned first to Sir Roland, whose money, loyalty, fear of change, the mantle. These are the currents that drive I retired shortly after dinner. Mademoiselle Warwick, you chose a dangerous Mother path, was in high spirits, was talking of the Christmas festivities. This it will be considered. I went to my study to review some estate papers. But for now, let us reflect on what we have learned. I was there until nearly midnight, then went to bed, rising with quiet authority. Clara can confirm I was in our room all night. It was the heart of this Clara nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Lady Beatrice, in her desire to protect her legacy, stirred tensions that simmered beneath the surface. I didn't hear anything else until Violet screamed. Your debts weighed heavily, Poirot's and your mother feared they would ruin the estate. And you, Madame, what kept you awake? Violet, your dreams of travel clashed with her vision of tradition. Just, Madame Clara, your fear and silence hid a truth creaking could have saved much pain. I'm not used to such isolation. And you, Monsieur Grayson, Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, yet and turned to Violet. Hoping they would resolve themselves. Eldridge, you were the first to discover the absence of Lady Beatrice. I thought it was family business, Monsieur Poirot. I didn't Violet see the danger. Her eyes bright with unshed Poirot tears. Nodded, his eyes gleaming. I was with Martin. And that, mes amis, is the tragedy. The danger lies in silence until about secrets kept too long. Then I went to my room. The clues, the blood, I didn't sleep well either. The wind was dreadful. They were but signposts. At dawn, I thought to check on Aunt Beatrice. The true mystery was in the hearts of those in this room, and it is there that Hercule Poirot finds his answer. I knocked, got no answer, Violet's voice trembled. That's when I saw the bed empty, the window open, and didn't you tell us? Her voice broke. If we'd known about the trust, we could have talked, avoided all this. Dr. Crane adjusted his Lady Beatrice's eyes, his tone measured, her voice weary. I can confirm Violet's account. Protect you, Violet. After cards, I retired to my room, which is next to hers. They frightened me. I heard nothing until her scream change would secure the future. Mr. Grayson still see now I should have trusted you all to find a way together. I had a nightcap in the billiard room with Poirot's gaze. Fine fellow, by the way. Until about 10:30. Trusted is the foundation then I went of a family as it is of justice. Slept like a log until the commotion, the consequences are grave. Harrow inclined his head, his voice dry. It can be as rebuilt. Grayson says, the snow it will melt and the police will come. The decline of modern Mademoiselle drama. Warwick will face her reckoning shortly after. Family Eldridge, my room's on the east wing, far from Lady Beatrice's. Her voice barely audible. I heard nothing. Spoke. Miss Warwick, should have said something about the shadow. I helped Lady Beatrice prepare for bed. I didn't know what it meant. She was in her usual smile was gentle, firm but kind. Fear, Madame, it clouds the mind. The fire does not erase the curtains and left. You spoke when it mattered, and that is enough. I heard nothing until Violet screamed. His tone thoughtful broke the silence. Poirot listened. His head turned our drama into a lesson, Monsieur Poirot. When the accounts were complete, he paced slowly before the fire. His polished shoes gleaming, inclined his head, a faint smile playing at his lips. We have a timeline, but it is like a tapestry with threads is life itself, and the true window it was closed by Monsieur Simmons at 11. Yet open Poirot merely arranges the blood on the sill so the curtain may rise. and the snow
as the
undisturbed.
guests sat in quiet
These
reflection.
are the facts, and they
Lady
do not
Beatrice
lie.
reached for Roland's
Like
hand,
people,
her
mes
grip
amis,
firm despite her
people
frailty.
sometimes do. We will find a way,
gasp
Roland,
escaped Clara,
together.
and Roland's jaw tightened.
Roland nodded, his eyes
Violet
glistening.
clutched Dr. Crane's
Yes,
arm
mother.
while Grayson stopped pacing,
Together,
his eyes narrowing.
Poirot turned to Hastings,
Harrow
his voice
raised an
low.
eyebrow, and Miss
Mon
Warwick's
ami,
lips
the
pressed
case
into
it
a
is
thin
closed.
line.
The little
Poirot
grey cells, they
continued
have done their
undeterred.
work. Now we love the
I
Eldridges
propose
to
we
mend their
examine the
bonds,
room
and we
once
depart
more,
as
but
quietly
with
as we
care.
came. Hastings, you will assist
Hastings
me.
moved
The
by the
rest
scene
remain
nodded.
here. Do not
You've
discuss,
done it again,
do not
Poirot.
speculate. The truth
I don't
it is
know how you
delicate
see
and
through the
must
fog
not
of
be
human
disturbed.
nature.
The guests nodded,
Poirot's
their
eyes
faces a
twinkled.
gallery of unease.
It is simple,
And
Hastings.
Poirot led Hastings
The
back
heart
to Lady
speaks
Beatrice's
even when the
bedroom.
lips are silent.
The room was as they had
One
left
must
it.
only listen.
The bed disheveled.
The
As the
window
first
opened,
rays of dawn
the
broke
slipper
through
on
the
the floor.
snow-heavy clouds, Poirot
knelt by
and
the
Hastings
sill,
prepared
his
to leave the
magnifying
manor,
glass
their
catching
task
the light
complete.
as he
studied the blood. The guests,
It is
their
dry,
secrets
he
laid
murmured,
bare, faced
but
a
not
new
old.
day with the promise of
A few hours,
reconciliation.
perhaps.
And see Hastings,
The
the edge
snow
of the
still
sill falling
falling
softly,
as though
seemed
something
less
heavy
a
was
barrier
dragged
now.
across it.
More a blanket
Hastings
of
peered
renewal
over his
covering the
shoulder.
wounds of the
past.
body, you mean?
Poirot's
Poirot's
eyes
eyes
gleamed.
buttoned and his hat
Perhaps.
tilted just so,
Or
stepped
perhaps
into
something
the
else.
cold, his
And the
mind
slipper.
already
Why
turning
only
to the
one?
next puzzle, while
Lady
Hastings
Beatrice,
followed.
she was a woman of
marveling
order.
at the quiet
Would she leave her
genius
room
of the
half
little
shod?
Belgian detective.
They examined the
brought
bed,
light
the
to
wardrobe,
the
the
darkest
fireplace.
of mysteries. Poirot paused at a small
Chapter
writing
12,
desk where a letter
The
lay
Shadows of
half-finished,
Truth.
addressed to Roland. The dawn had broken
The
over
words were
Eldridge
innocuous,
Manor, its pale
a
light
discussion of the
filtering through
Christmas
the
menu.
snow-heavy clouds.
But Poirot's
casting a
fingers
soft
lingered
glow
on the
over
paper.
the weary faces within.
The ink, he
The
said.
drawing room, though
It is
still
smudged
warmed
as
by
though
the embers
written
of
in
the previous
haste.
night's fire, felt less
Yet
like
the
a
hand
crucible
is
of
steady.
suspicion and more like
Curious,
a sanctuary for Hastings,
Allez.
frustrated by the
Tentative
cryptic
healing.
clues, shook his head. Lady Beatrice, though
baffling,
weakened
Poirot.
by her ordeal,
No
sat
tracks,
with a
no
quiet dignity,
signs
her
of a
presence
struggle,
anchoring
and
the
yet she's
room.
gone.
Hercule
be
Poirot, his impeccable
supernatural?
attire untouched by the
Poirot's
long night,
laugh was
stood
sharp
near the
like the
hearth,
crack of a whip.
his green eyes reflecting a
Supernatural?
calm satisfaction,
Mon Dieu, Hastings,
tempered
you
by the
wound
weight of
me.
human frailty.
There is no
He
ghost
had
here,
uncovered.
only
human nature with all its
Captain
complexities.
Hastings,
Seated nearby,
we shall
felt
find
a mix
Lady
of relief
Beatrice
or
and
what became
curiosity.
of her. Sensing
But first
that
we must
Poirot's
understand
work,
the
though
hearts of
complete
those
in
who
solving
surround
the
her.
mystery, was not yet finished.
As
in
they
its
returned to the
aftermath.
drawing room,
the butler,
the
Simmons,
guests
their
approached,
nerves
his
still
face
raw
pale.
from the revelation, sat
Sir,
in a subdued circle.
a
message came
Sir
through on the
Roland
telephone
Eldridge's
before
earlier
it went
defiance
dead, softened
the
by
storm,
his
you
mother's
see.
survival, stood
The
close
police
to
are
her,
delayed possibly
his hand
until
resting
tomorrow.
lightly on her
We are
shoulder.
truly cut off.
Clara, his
Poirot
wife,
nodded,
sat with
his
her hands
expression
folded,
serene.
her tearful eyes now
Balm.
calm, though shadowed by
Then
guilt.
it is to Hercule Poirot to
Violet
unravel
Eldridge,
this
her
knot.
vivacity
The
returning
snow,
in
it preserves
cautious
the
measure,
scene,
sat
but it
beside
also
Dr.
traps the
Martin
guilty,
Crane,
and they, mes
whose
amis,
amis
are
are
here
here
among
among a
us.
newfound resolve.
The
guests exchanged
Mr.
glances,
Theodore
their
Grayson, the
unease
solicitor,
palpable,
leaned forward,
and
Hastings
Hastings
felt
felt
a
a
chill
chill
that
that had
had
nothing
nothing
to
to
do
do
with
with
the
the
storm. His
storm.
role in the family's discord.
Poirot's little grey cells were
Miss
at work,
Evelyn Warwick,
and the manor, once
her
a haven of
composure
festivity,
shattered,
was
sat
now a
apart,
stage
her
for a
hands
drama of
clasped
deception
tightly,
and
her eyes
discovery.
downcast. Chapter 4. Mr. Julian Harrow, the
questions
playwright,
deepened.
observed the scene with a quiet
The
intensity.
snowstorm, unrelenting
His
in its
usual
fury, had
sardonic
transformed
air
Eldridge
replaced
Manor
by a
into an
thoughtful
island
respect.
adrift in a sea of white.
Poirot paced slowly.
By early
his
afternoon,
polished
the
shoes
drawing
clicking
room with its
softly on the
crackling
oak
fire
floor,
and
his
heavy
voice
velvet
clear
curtains
and measured,
had
become a crucible of tension,
Mesdames et messieurs,
where each glance
he
and
began.
gesture
The
carried the
mystery
weight
of
of
Lady
unspoken
Beatrice's
disappearance
accusations
has been solved. Hercule
But the shadows
Poirot,
of truth
seated in his
linger.
chosen armchair,
The clues,
his hands
the
folded
blood,
neatly over
the
his
slipper,
waistcoat,
the wool,
observed
the
the
scuff
assembled
mark, the
guests
shadow,
with the calm
were but
precision
the
of a
surface
chess
of a
master
deeper truth.
contemplating his
The
next
fragility
move.
of trust
within a family.
Captain Hastings,
Hercule
standing by
Poirot
the
does
hearth,
not felt
merely
the air
uncover
thick
crime.
with unease, as
He
though the
reveals
very
the heart,
walls of the
and
manor
in
held
doing
their
so
breath,
offers a
waiting
chance
for
for
Poirot's
redemption.
next revelation.
Lady Beatrice,
The
her
guests,
voice steady
still
despite her
reeling from the
frailty,
morning
spoke.
shock, sat in a loose
Monsieur
semicircle.
Poirot,
You have given me back my gallery of strained
but also my
expressions.
family.
So I see now the mistakes I made.
His knuckles white as he gripped his brandy
for
glass.
the future. Stared into the
I should
fire.
have trusted
His
Roland
jaw
and
set.
Violet to find a path forward.
Clara, his wife, twisted
Poirot
her
inclined
handkerchief,
his
her
head,
eyes darting
his mustache
nervously
twitching
toward the
faintly.
door. Madame the Violet Eldridge. It is earlier vivacity, now a memory sat close to Dr. Martin Crane. You sought to protect, whose spectacles glinted as he adjusted them repeatedly. Become a cage. Mr. Theodore Grayson, the solicitor, misguided loyalties, believed she was saving you from a painful choice. Drummed an impatient rhythm on yet the her actions, they exposed the wounds that needed Evelyn healing. Warwick, Lady Beatrice's companion, maintained her quiet composure. Her hands folded in her lap, but her eyes missed nothing. I thought I was helping. Mr. Julian Harrow, the playwright, leaned back with an air of detached curiosity. His face, though his sardonic smile had faded. Poirot rose, his small stature commanding the room's attention. Safe. And that's Mesdames and Messieurs, he began, his voice clear and deliberate, when the police arrive. The disappearance of Lady Beatrice is a puzzle of many pieces, and we have only begun to assemble them. Monsieur Eldridge. The open window, the drop of blood, the slip snow, permit. These are not accidents, Mademoiselle Warwick, signposts to the truth, but justice to find. It is not only punishment, it is understanding. Let us consider the motives each of you drove this drama. And I ask for honesty. He turned to Roland, his gaze piercing. Lie, it can obscure the path to justice. Your debts weighed heavily on your mother's heart, but Poirot's feared for the estate, for the legacy. He turned first to Sir Roland, of her plan to alter the trust. Monsieur's jaw tightened, but he nodded. You spoke of estate papers last night. She hinted these at debts you mentioned. Said the estate needed protecting. How pressing are they, and how did they affect your mother? But I never thought, I never imagined they would lead to this. The estate's finances are strained, as I said, and you, Mademoiselle, your dreams of travel clashed with her vision, insisting on preserving it for future generations. We disagreed on investments. Her eyes meeting. She favored tradition. I wanted modernization to carry on the family name. But it was no secret, and certainly no cause for fairness meant more responsibility for me. Not his voice faltered. Cutting Roland out. Sip of brandy. I wish I'd spoken to her, his expression unreadable. Clara, her voice barely audible. And you, Madame Eldridge, he said, turning to Clara, said more about the shadow. You were sleepless last night. I was so afraid I didn't know what it meant, the storm that kept you awake. Clara's cheeks flushed and her smile was tightened on her handkerchief. Madame Clara, your fear was human. You spoke when I've always been a light sleeper, and that courage, the manner is so old, so full of noises. Do not. I heard nothing on what might have the wind and the creaking of beams. He turned to Grayson, whose face was drawn. Poirot's eyes lingered on her, and Monsieur Grayson, as solicitor, you knew the tensions within the family. Why did you not act to mediate? Violet. Grayson sighed, his voice heavy. You visited your aunt's room at dawn. I thought it was their private matter. Why so early? Lady Beatrice was resolute, and I trusted her judgment. Violet's eyes I see now I should have pressed her to share her plans openly. Harrow, his tone always rose early. I thought this is a drama worthy of the stage, to discuss the Christmas plans. A family torn by secrets, a loyal companion driven to desperation, a detective who sees what others miss. When I found her gone, I was terrified. I confess, I underestimated at her side, nodded. Poirot's eyes Violet was worried about her aunt. The stage, Monsieur Harrow, is life in our card game. Hercule told her was likely arranges the players so the truth may shine. He trailed off, but adjusting his spectacles. It is not the end. It is a beginning. Poirot turned to Grayson. This family it can rebuild. Monsieur Grayson is the family solicitor. You know the details of the Eldridge trust. Her grip firm. Were there any recent changes? We will, any disputes that might shed light on this matter? We'll find a way to balance the past and Grayson the future. Hesitated, his fingers the trust will be fair for all of us. The trust is complex, but Violet stable. Nodded, her eyes glistening. Lady Beatrice was adamant about its terms. We'll make it work equal together. Shares for Roland and Violet upon her death, with provisions for the estate's support Violet and the family. There were no recent changes. We'll find Roland did press. Poirot nodded, his expression serene. Nothing unusual in a family of the heart of the Eldridges is strong, and it will heal. Poirot's gaze shifted to Miss Warwick. Let this be a lesson. Secrets, Mademoiselle, they're like the snow. They may cover, but they cannot erase. Did she confide in you about any fears, trust, and the shadows will fade? Evelyn's voice was calm, as the guests absorbed his words. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. She was private, proud. Our work she mentioned no threats, but the police will handle what remains, and we shall depart, leaving this family to mend their bonds. She never elaborated. Hastings, marveling at Poirot's insight, addressed Harrow. You've turned chaos into clarity, Poirot. Here, yet your I don't know how you do it. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Last night, the little gray cells, Hastings, out of place. See what the heart hides. Harrow's lips Now let us prepare to leave this manor for other puzzles. I'm a writer, Monsieur Poirot. The snow outside had begun to thin. The storm's fury felt like a stage, and the first signs of a clear path to the outside world emerged. But there were undercurrents. The guests, Roland's tension, their faces Clara's reflecting a tentative hope, began to disperse. Lady Beatrice thought it mere family friction, but now he shrugged, leaving the fate uncertain, remained silent. Poirot nodded, pacing slowly before the fire. Poirot, his coat buttoned and his hat tilted. Your answers, they are threads toward the door, his work complete. But there are gaps. Inconsistencies followed, his mind still reeling from the brilliance of his friend. Who opened it after Monsieur Simmons had navigated the shadows and the blood of truth to bring light to Eldridge Manor? And how did it come to be there? Chapter 13. Roland's voice was sharp, the echoes of motive. You're suggesting one of us is lying. The morning light, though still filtered through a veil of thinning snow. I suggest nothing, brought a tentative sense of renewal to Eldridge Manor. And I note that no one has mentioned the letter on Lady Beatrice's desk, drawn back to admit the pale glow. Haste seemed less a stage she for writing such an hour, and more a space for a collective intake of breath followed, and Hastings saw Lady Clara's eyes, though still frail from her ordeal, sat with a regal composure, her iron-gray hair neatly arranged, her eyes continued undeterred. Hercule Poirot examined the alibis and polished shoes, a stark contrast to the manor's weathered grandeur. The house was locked at 11. His green eyes reflecting the calm that belied the storm of emotions he had navigated. What followed was a meticulous reconstruction of the previous night. By a window watched the snowdrifts. Simmons reiterated locking the doors and windows. His thoughts at lingering on Poirot's retiring to his quarters, unraveling the mystery and the fragile hope now dawning among the Eldridge family. Confirmed seeing no one in the corridors after their faces marked by the weight of the past days. Roland claimed to have left his study at midnight. Sir Roland Clara heard him enter his earlier anger replaced by a weary determination, stood close to his Grayson and Harrow, his hand resting lightly on her chair. Clara, his wife, sat with her hands folded, her eyes clear but shadowed by the guilt of her silence. Poirot listened, his fingers steeped, his eyes half closed, her vivacity tempered by newfound maturity. The timeline beside clear, yet it tells us little. Whose steady gaze suggested the window, the blood, the slipper. These are the Theodore Grayson, Hastings the solicitor. We shall inspect the grounds, expression one of introspection, much as though reassessing his role in the family's discord, leaving a landscape of Miss Evelyn Warwick, her composure broken. Poirot, bundled in his overcoat, examined the terrace beneath Lady Beatrice's window. Mr. Julian Harrow, the playwright, observed the scene with a thoughtful air, his magnifying his usual sardonic edge softened by respect for Poirot's master, barely discernible near the wall. Poirot paced slowly, his movements precise, his voice clear and resonant. Not a footprint, but "Mesdames et Messieurs." He began. Hastings, shivering, peered over his shoulder. The mystery of Lady Beatrice's disappearance has been laid bare, but its echoes It means, mon ami, that the impossible is not impossible. Someone has been clever, the slipper, the wool, the scuff mark, the shadow it preserves, were but it also betrays a deeper truth. Returning indoors, the motives that drive the human heart. Tell me of the manor's layout. Hercule Poirot does not merely solve crimes. Old houses they have to understand, to illuminate. Simmons so that those who remain may learn. There's a service. Lady Beatrice, behind her voice firm despite her frailty, spoke. It's narrow, Monsieur Poirot. Used. The door is hidden behind saved not only my life, but our family. Poirot's eyes gleamed. I see now the error of my secrecy, the harm it caused, and the keys to the house. Understand why did Evelyn act alone? Only myself and Lady Beatrice. No one else? Simmons replied. Poirot's mustache twitched. Hers are still in her room on the dresser. Madame, the inspection Mademoiselle Warwick acted from a heart torn between loyalty and fear. No blood, only dust and cobwebs. She believed your plan to alter the trust which shattered the family, and in her desperation she chose a path of the pieces they begin to align. he said. Let us examine the motives that fueled this drama, for they are the echoes that it requires silenced for healing to begin. As the afternoon waned, he turned to Roland, his eyes piercing, their glances sharp, their silences heavier. Your debts were a shadow over this house. Poirot, undaunted, sat by the fire. Lady Beatrice, his mind a whirl of unseen calculations. Did you sense her distrust, her plan to protect the legacy was weaving a net? And soon, Roland's face caught in its threads, but he nodded slowly. Chapter 5. I knew she was worried. The red herrings. We argued about the estate, snowstorm, selling land left Eldridge Manor in a state of eerie isolation. About the trust changes, its grand halls and shadowed corridors steeped in a silence broken only by the occasional creak of ancient openly, not pushed her away. By late afternoon, the drawing room had become a stage for mounting tension. Mademoiselle, your dreams of freedom clashed with your aunt's vision growing unease. Did you know how Hercule Poirot wished you to carry the family impeccable in a charcoal suit? Violet's eyes sat with an air of serene authority. His green eyes scanning the room as though reading and uphold the Eldridge name. Captain Hastings, her talk of fairness near the window, watched not the snowdrift pile higher. I should have his mind wrestling with the enigma of Lady Beatrice's disappearance. I didn't realize how much it weighed on her. The single drop of blood nodded, turning the open window and the solitary slipper haunted him, your Poirot's calm suggested a puzzle slowly taking shape. Why did you not trust the guests reassembled at Poirot's request? Bore the strain of the day's events, barely audible. Sir Roland Eldridge, his face etched terrible, with fatigue, and I didn't stood by the mantel, his brandy glass now empty. I stayed quiet, it would go away. Clara, his wife, sat with her hands clasped. I nearly lost her eyes, avoiding those of her husband. Poirot's smile was gentle. Violet Eldridge, her earlier distress tempered by a force, but it is not your master. Beside Dr. Martin Crane. You spoke when it mattered, and that is courage. With nervous precision. He turned to Grayson, whose face was Theodore drawn. Grayson, the solicitor, had resumed Grayson, his pacing. You knew of the family's tensions, yet you remained silent. Why? Miss Evelyn Warwick, his voice the silent observer, sat with her hands folded, it was their private gaze sharp and unyielding. Lady Beatrice was resolute. Mr. Julian Rhind-Tutt, the playwright, lounged in a chair. Now that his sardonic air now tinged with a wary curiosity. I should have urged openness. Poirot rose, his movements deliberate, and addressed the group. This is a drama of motives, Monsieur Poirot. The disappearance of Lady Beatrice's loyalty, tapestry woven with threads peeled back the layers like a master playwright. We have heard your alibis, your movements, but now the police will come and Evelyn will face her fate. There are clues, yes, but also distractions. Poirot's eyes red herrings, as you English say. What becomes, Monsieur Harrow, is a choice. Let us examine them closely. May choose to rebuild. A murmur of unease where they once were silent. Roland's voice to trust through where they once feared. What do you mean distractions? The motives that drove this mystery dead, and you speak of loyalty, fear. They are human. Poirot's mustache and they can be overcome. Not games, Lady Beatrice reached but for Roland's hand, her grip firm. Someone in this house wishes us to look one way while the truth lies elsewhere. Roland Violet will rewrite the trust together. For instance, the open no window. More secrets. It suggests an escape or an abduction, yet the snow is undisturbed. I'll stay, Aunt Beatrice. A red herring will make it work for all of us. Think Lady Beatrice left the manor resolute added. In fact, she may never have stand by Violet and the family. Clara gasped, her handkerchief pressed to her lips. Poirot's expression was serene. Still here? Hidden somewhere? Poirot's the echoes of motive, they fade when the heart speaks. It is a possibility, madame. Mademoiselle the manor is vast. Your fate lies with the law, but your confession for years. Your redemption. But let us consider another distraction. For the Eldridges to decide. On the sill. A single drop so small yet so prominent. I'll accept what comes there unless to draw our attention. I only wanted to protect you. Violet's voice was sharp. Lady Beatrice's eyes You're saying it was deliberate. I know, Evelyn. Someone staged and in time, perhaps we can Poirot forgive. Inclined his head. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. Or perhaps it was an accident. Mon ami, magnified by our fears. But the work of healing must not be swayed by appearance. We shall leave this Let us turn to the alibis, which I confess are too neat. Hastings, whose admiration for Poirot undimmed. He turned to Dr. Crane, whose fingers froze on his tragedy into a chance for renewal, Poirot. Monsieur le Docteur, it's remarkable. You were in the library Poirot's with Mademoiselle Violet until 11. The yet little gray cells from the corridor. They see from Lady Beatrice's the heart which is not far. Let us not curious. The snow melts and the world awaits. The wind was loud,
as the guests
walls
began
thick.
to disperse.
Lady
Focused on the
and her
card
family
game
lingered.
Their faces
I suppose I wasn't
reflecting a
listening for
fragile
anything
hope.
else. Poirot
The snow
nodded, his
outside,
gaze shifting
now
to
thinning,
Grayson, revealed glimpses of
and
the
you,
world
Monsieur
beyond.
Grayson, you shared a nightcap
world
with
where the
Monsieur Harrow
Eldridges
until
could
10:45. Yet
Poirot,
you, a man
his
of
coat
law,
buttoned and his hat
noticed
tilted
nothing
just
amiss
so,
in a house
stepped
where a
toward
woman
the door,
vanishes.
Hastings at his side.
Grayson's pacing
The
stopped.
manor, once a
His
prison
tone
of
defensive,
secrets, was now a place of possibility.
I'm a solicitor, not a detective.
I was tired,
fading under
too
the
much
light
brandy.
of
I went to bed and slept
Chapter
soundly.
14.
Harrow,
The
leaning
net
forward,
tightens.
The
I
drawing
can
room
vouch
of
for that.
Thornfield Grange was heavy
Grayson
with the
was
weight
in
of
fine
unspoken
spirits.
truths.
Too fine, perhaps.
Its air thick with the scent
saw
of
nothing
polished
unusual,
wood,
though
and
I'll
the faint
admit the
acrid
manor's
tang
atmosphere
of fear.
felt
The fire in the grand hearth crackled. Poirot's eyes
casting
narrowed, long shadows that danced
charged,
across
you
the
say.
faces of the gathered
An interesting
company.
choice of word.
And
Hercule
you, Poirot,
Mademoiselle
stood at
Warwick,
the
you
center
left
of the
Lady
room.
Beatrice at
His small,
10:35.
immaculate
Did she
figure
seem
commanding
herself, or was
attention
there something,
despite his
a word,
unassuming
a
stature
gesture
that betrayed unease? His hands were clasped
Evelyn's
behind
voice
his
was
back,
steady, but her fingers
his head
tightened in her
tilted
lap.
slightly, and his eyes sharp
She was,
as
as
falcon's,
always,
moved
composed,
from one
precise.
suspect to another with
She mentioned the
deliberate
Christmas
precision.
plans, nothing more.
The
I
tension
saw no
was
cause for
palpable.
alarm.
A taut string
Poirot
stretched
paced
to
slowly,
the point of breaking.
his polished shoes clicking on the floor.
Captain Hastings, seated near the fireplace,
We have
felt his
alibis,
pulse
but alibis
quicken. Are like shadows. He had
They
seen
shift with the
Poirot in
light.
this mode before. Let us consider
calm
another
before
distraction.
the
Storm. The letter on
The
Lady
moment when
Beatrice's
the
Belgian
desk,
detective's little
a mundane
gray
note
cells
about the
aligned
Christmas
to
menu,
unravel
yet
the tangled
smudged,
skein
as
of
though
a
written
crime.
in
haste. Hastings
Why
glanced
such
at the
urgency
others.
for so trivial a matter?
Lady Eleanor, her face
Roland's
pale
jaw
but
tightened.
composed, her gloved,
It was
hands
to me.
folded tightly in her
She
lap.
often
wrote notes
Dr.
about
Mortimer,
household
his
matters.
jaw
It
set,
means
his
nothing.
eyes
Darting nervously. Perhaps Miss
Poirot
Clara
said, his
clutching
tone
a
mild.
handkerchief, her youthful
But
beauty
nothing
marred
is
by
nothing
a quiver of
in a
dread
case
such as this. Mr. Reginald
The slipper,
Thornfield
too, why only
slouched
one?
in an armchair. A woman
His
of Lady
usual
Beatrice's
arrogance
order would
tempered
not
by
leave her
unease.
room half shot, and
Unless
Mrs.
compelled.
Agnes Whitmore, the housekeeper,
The
whose
room fell
steely
silent,
gaze betrayed
the weight of
nothing but a
Poirot's
faint
words
tremor
settling
in her
over the
fingers.
guests.
Inspector
Hastings, watching
Grange,
closely,
standing by the
noted the
door
subtle
with two
shifts.
constables, watched Poirot
Clara's
with a
quick
mixture of
glance at Roland,
skepticism and
Violet's
reluctant
tightening
admiration.
grip
On Crane's arm.
Monsieur
Monsieur
and
sudden
Madame.
stillness. Poirot began, his
Poirot
voice smooth
continued,
and
undeterred.
We are
We
gathered
must now
here to
explore the
confront
manor
truth.
further.
The service
truth
passage
that has
behind
been
Lady
obscured by
Beatrice's
lies.
room. It is a
Half-truths
possibility,
and the
yes?
most
artful deception.
Monsieur
Simmons, you will show us
The murder
every
of Sir
entrance.
Geoffrey
Thornfield was no act
Simmons,
of
the
impulse,
butler,
no
nodded, his
crime
face
of passion
pale but
committed in a
composed.
fleeting moment.
Of course, sir.
None.
There are
was a
3
calculated
entrances,
act,
one behind the
planned
tapestry
with
in her
care,
room,
and one in the
executed
servants'
with
corridor,
precision.
and one near the kitchen.
But as always,
All are
the
locked,
truth
and only
leaves
I
its
and
mark
Lady
like
Beatrice held
footprints
keys
in the
snow. Poirot's
And
eyes
Hercule
gleamed.
Poirot
has followed
and
those
her keys
footprints.
to
They
their
remain on her
source.
dresser.
A
Interesting.
murmur rippled through the room.
Let us
quickly
inspect
silenced
this
by
passage
Poirot's
again
raised
with care.
hand.
The group,
Let us begin,
minus the guests,
he said,
who were
with the
instructed
night of
to
the
remain
crime,
in the
drawing
December
room,
23rd,
followed Simmons
at
to the
precisely
service passage.
10:17 p.m. The narrow
When Sir
corridor
Geoffrey was
accessed
found
via
dead
a
in his
concealed
study
door
behind
behind
a
a
faded
bullet through his
tapestry
heart
was
dim and dusty. The weapon,
Its
a
walls
wobbly
lined
revolver,
with
was
cracked
discovered in
plaster.
the snow outside. Poirot
Wiped
moved slowly,
clean of
his magnifying
fingerprints.
glass catching the
The
faint
window
light
was
from a
open,
single
suggesting an
bulb.
intruder, yet the
He
snow
paused
around
at a
the
spot
house
near
showed
the bedroom
no
entrance,
footprints
save
save
those
those
of the
scuff
household
mark
marred the floor.
A paradox, n'est-ce
Regardez,
pas?
Hastings,
But
he
paradoxes,
said,
my
my
friends, are merely
not a
truths
footprint,
waiting
but
to
a
be
trace.
understood.
Something was
He
moved
paced
here,
slowly,
something
his
heavy.
polished shoes clicking
Hastings
softly
squinted.
on the hardwood
A
floor.
trunk, perhaps?
Or the alibis,
A body?
he continued.
Poirot's smile was
were
enigmatic.
meticulously constructed.
Patience, mon ami. The facts,
Lady
they will
Eleanor,
speak
you
in
were
time.
in the drawing room with
The
Miss
passage
Clara,
yielded no
reading
further
aloud
clues.
from a
No
novel
blood,
at
no
the time
fibers,
of the
only
shot.
dust, disturbed by their own
Dr.
passage.
Mortimer, you were in the
Yet
library,
Poirot's expression was
reviewing
one of
medical
quiet
journals.
satisfaction.
Mr. Reginald, you
as though he
claimed
had
to
found
have
a
been
piece
in
of the
your
puzzle
room
invisible
writing
to
letters.
others. And Mrs. Whitmore,
Back in the
you
drawing
were in the
room, he
kitchen
addressed the guests
preparing the
once more.
evening's cocoa.
We
Each
have
of you,
searched,
so it seems,
we have
accounted
questioned,
for,
and yet the truth eludes
yet
us.
one of you lied,
But not for long.
Lady
The
Eleanor's
red
lips bearings, they are many.
She said nothing.
But Hercule Poirot
Dr.
sees
Mortimer
through them.
Shifted uncomfortably.
I ask you now to reflect on your
around
words,
the armrest
your
of his
actions.
chair. Someone
Poirot
here knows
gaze
more
settled
than they
on him.
say.
A sharp intake of breath came from Clara,
You have been
and
most
Roland's
helpful in
eyes
providing
flashed with
anger.
medical details of Sir
This
Geoffrey's
is
death.
outrageous.
A
He
single
snapped.
shot. You're accusing
Instantaneous.
us all
No
without
sign of
proof.
struggle.
Poirot's
Yet you
voice
omitted
was
a
calm,
curious
almost
detail,
soothing.
did you not?
Not
The
accusing,
faint bruise
monsieur.
on Sir Geoffrey's
Observe it,
wrist noted
The
in
proof
your
it will
initial
come as surely as the
examination,
snow
but
falls.
absent from your report
But
to
for now,
Inspector Grange.
we wait.
Why,
We
I
watch,
wonder, would you
and we
conceal
listen.
such a thing?
As the
doctor's
guests
face
dispersed,
flushed,
their faces a mix of fear
I
and
saw
defiance.
no relevance in
Hastings
it.
drew
He
Poirot
stammered.
aside.
A minor
You're
mark,
stirring them up,
likely from his
Poirot. Do you
watch or
think
a
one of them
fall
is
earlier
guilty?
that day?
Poirot's eyes
Poirot's
twinkled.
mustache twitched.
Guilty,
a faint smile
Hastings.
playing beneath it.
Perhaps.
A minor
But guilt
mark,
is a
you
complex
say.
thing, woven of
Yet
motive
it tells
and
a story.
opportunity.
A man does not bruise.
The red herrings
his
they
wrist
distract
from a watch,
but the
unless
truth,
it is gripped tightly.
It is like a diamond in the
Perhaps
snow.
in a moment of
It
restraint.
sparkles if one knows
And
where to
Sir
look.
Geoffrey, a man of robust
The afternoon
health,
faded
would
into
not
evening.
bruise so easily.
The manor's
without
isolation
force.
growing more oppressive.
Someone held him briefly.
Hastings,
before
watching
the
the
shot was
snow
fired,
fall,
someone
felt the
he
weight of the
trusted
mystery
old
pressing in.
A
But
gasp
Poirot's
escaped Miss
calm
Clara,
assurance
quickly
was a
stifled
beacon in the storm.
Reginald's eyes narrowed,
The little
but he
Belgian
remained
detective
silent.
was closing in.
Poirot continued,
and the guilty,
undeterred.
whoever they were,
Let us turn
could
to the
not hide
revolver.
forever. A curious
Chapter
choice,
6.
no? A
It
clue
belongs to
detail.
Mr. Reginald.
The
kept
twilight
in a locked
descended
case
upon
in the
Eldridge
study.
Manor with a quiet
Yet
menace.
Mr. Reginald
The
claims he had
snow-laden
not
clouds
touched it in
casting a
months.
pall over the house.
The
that
lock
seemed
was
to
not
mirror
forced,
the growing
suggesting the
disquiet
key was
within.
used.
Only
The
two
drawing
people
room
had
once a
access
haven
to
of
that
festive
key.
cheer
Mr.
now
Reginald
felt
and
like a
Mrs.
Whitmore,
Whitmore,
who
who
every
oversees
glance
the
and
household
gesture
keys,
carried the weight of suspicion.
Mrs. Whitmore's composure
Hercule
faltered for a
Poirot,
moment, her
seated
hands
by the
clenching.
fire, his small hands
I told
folded
you, Monsieur
neatly over
Poirot,
his
the key
waistcoat,
was in its
observed
place
the
that
guests
evening
with a gaze
I
that
checked
missed
it myself.
nothing.
Précisément,
Captain
Poirot
Hastings,
said, his tone
standing near the
deceptively mild.
window, watched the snow
And
continue
yet,
its relentless
the
fall.
revolver was
His
taken,
mind turning over the
used and
cryptic
discarded.
clues. The
A
open
clever
window,
attempt to
the
suggest
drop
an
of blood,
outsider,
the
but the
solitary
absence of
slipper,
footprints in
and
the
now
snow
the
betrays the
faint scuff
truth.
mark in the service
The
passage.
killer was already inside the house.
Poirot's calm suggested progress,
He turned to
but
Lady
to Hastings
Eleanor.
the mystery
His eyes
remained
softened, but
elaborate,
no less piercing.
The guests gathered once more
Lady
at
Eleanor,
Poirot's
your
insistence,
composure is
sat in
admirable, but your
uneasy
grief
silence.
is not without complexity.
Sir Roland
Geoffrey,
Eldridge,
his
will,
face
which
haggard,
leaves
leaned
the
against the
estate to Miss
mantel.
Clara,
His
was a
empty
source of
brandy
tension,
glass
was it
forgotten
not?
in his hand.
You stood to lose much.
Clara, his
Control
wife,
of
sat with her
Thornfield
hands
Grange, clasped
your home
so
of 20
tightly,
years.
her knuckles gleamed
And yet
white.
your alibi is corroborated
Violet
by Miss
Eldridge,
Clara.
her earlier sparks
A
of
perfect
dew
alibi,
fidgeted
perhaps
beside
too
Doctor.
perfect. Lady
Martin
Eleanor's
Crane,
chin
whose
lifted defiantly,
spectacles caught the fire.
I loved
as
my
he
husband,
adjusted them
Monsieur
nervously.
Poirot. I had no
Mr.
reason
Theodore
to wish him
Grayson,
harm.
the solicitor, had ceased
Poirot
pacing,
nodded
but
as
his
if
fingers
conceding the
twitched,
point,
as though
then
he
turned
turned
to
to
Miss
move.
Clara.
And
You,
Miss
Mademoiselle,
Warwick,
so young,
ever
so
so
devoted
devoted
to
to
your
your
uncle,
uncle,
sat with her hands
Yet
folded.
your devotion
her
was
eyes
tempered
sharp
by
and
fear.
watchful. Fear of his temper.
Mr. Julian
His
Marrow,
hands,
the playwright,
the
lounged
letters
with
with
an an
air
air
of
of hidden in
forced
your room
nonchalance,
suggest a secret
though his gaze
correspondence
darted
with a
toward
young man in
Poirot
London
with wary interest.
A man Sir Geoffrey
Poirot
would never
rose,
have
his
approved.
movements precise and addressed
A motive,
the group,
perhaps, to secure your
Mesdames et
inheritance
messieurs,
and your freedom.
The disappearance of Lady
Clara's
Beatrice
eyes
is a
widened.
puzzle of
Her
many
handkerchief
facets,
twisting
but
in
one
her hand.
facet gleams brighter
I would
than the
never.
others. Those letters are private.
A clue.
Small,
They prove
but
nothing.
significant that begins to
None, they
illuminate
prove
the
nothing
truth.
alone.
Poirot
Hercule
agreed.
Poirot does not
But they
rely
add
on
to the
chance,
picture,
but on the
Let us
meticulous
consider the
arrangement
timing.
of facts.
Today
The
we
shot
have found
was fired
such a
at
fact,
10:17
and
p.m.,
it demands
but the
our
clock
attention.
in the study was stopped at
A
10:50.
ripple of tension passed
A small
through the room.
discrepancy,
Roland's
but
voice was
significant.
sharp. Someone
What
tampered
clue?
with the clock
You've
to
been
confuse
poking
the
about all
timeline,
day, and we're
to
no
suggest
closer
the
to
murder
finding my
occurred
mother
earlier than it did.
Poirot's mustache
Why?
twitched, a faint
To protect
smile
an
playing
alibi
at his
that would
lips.
otherwise falter.
Patience, Monsieur
Inspector
Eldridge.
Grange leaned forward.
The clue,
his skepticism
it is
giving
not
way
a
to
grand
interest.
revelation, but a
You're
detail,
saying the killer
a gesture,
manipulated
a
the
mark,
scene?
a contradiction
Exactement.
that betrays the hand of the
Poirot
guilty.
said. And now let us consider the most curious
scuff
clue
mark
of
in
all.
the service passage.
The
found
single
this
snowflake
afternoon.
found on the study carpet.
It is
near
not
the
a footprint,
desk.
none.
The window was open,
But a
yet
trace
the snow
of
outside
something
was
heavy,
undisturbed.
dragged or
A
pushed.
snow snowflake? This mark, it tells us that the passage was used despite its dust and disuse. Suggests someone entered the study from outdoors. Violet's eyes widened. But only briefly and not through the window, Violet asked, her voice trembling. The servant's entrance, perhaps, where the snow was trampled to hide by daily use. Beatrice? Poirot's gaze paused, letting the silence stretch. Perhaps, mademoiselle. Mrs. Whitmore. Or perhaps softly, to move something else. You are a woman of remarkable discipline, something to mislead us. For years you served Sir Geoffrey, but let us turn to another demands, his disdain, one that has been overlooked. But the discovery of his plan letter to Lady Beatrice to leave a substantial sum to a note about the Christmas bypassing smudged with haste, yet written in a steady hand. You who had access to every key, every mundane secret of this house, and why, I ask, you was it addressed to Monsieur Roland even in a storm, when he was but a few rooms away? Mrs. Whitmore's face was Roland's jaw tightened, but her hands trembled. I've told you, she often wrote notes. It's nothing unusual, she said, her voice perhaps low. Poirot said, his tone mild. Poirot's eyes gleamed. But the smudge, proof is in the details. Interruption. The bruise on Sir Geoffrey's wrist matches the pressure of your grip, madam, as you steadied him for the shot. Why only one? The snowman of her precision carried on her room half slipped in, less compelled by force or fear. The clock, Harrow leaned forward, by your hands to blur the timeline. You're building a drama, Monsieur Poirot, to its case before being discarded, but not before you. Are these not trifles? You underestimated one thing, madame. The precision of Hercule Poirot. No. The room erupted in gasps. In the hands of Hercule Poirot, trifles become the keys to truth. Pale but defiant. Consider, for instance, weave the blood fine tale, monsieur, a single drop, dry but recent. A tale. Poirot's smile was said it might be a scratch, but we shall see, madame. A nail, a blade, Inspector Grange, I suggest a search so visible unless to draw our eyes. You will find, I think, a glove with traces of gunpowder residue hidden in a place only a housekeeper would know. Possible it was accidental. Grange nodded, motioning to the constable, perhaps, but I agree. As they moved toward Mrs. Whitmore, Hastings marveled at Poirot's genius. The net was in the window itself, closed by Monsieur Simmons at 11, yet open at dawn. Who opened it and why? The drawing room of Thornfield Grange seemed to hold its breath as the firelight flickered, casting long, wavering shadows. These are not coincidences, mes amis, but pieces of a puzzle. Hercule Poirot stood poised at the room's center. His composure seemed to falter, his small frame radiating an authority that belied you were Lady Beatrice's shadow. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, swept over the faces before him, each marked by a mixture of dread, anticipation, and in one case, but her barely concealed panic. Never, Monsieur Poirot. The air was thick with the weight of impending revelation. Workings. Her focus was the family, of a mystery that had ensnared them all in its icy Poirot's grip. Eyes narrowed. Captain Hastings, seated near the hearth, subject a familiar thrill coursed through Monsieur Grayson, as solicitor, you know its Poirot's denouements. Were there any provisions, any clauses that might felt so personal? The atmosphere so charged, Grayson's fingers still. Lady Eleanor sat cautious, her hands clasped tightly, her aristocratic composure. Equal shares for Roland and Violet upon Lady Beatrice's death. Face was a mask, a portion for the estate's upkeep. His fingers were drumming faintly on Roland wanted to sell land, Violet wanted funds for her. Her eyes red-rimmed, clutched her handkerchief as if it were a lifeline. Poirot's gaze shifted to Reginald Thornfield, slouched in his chair, his usual preoccupation replaced by a wary silence. Did she mention the trust specifically, or any Mrs. Agnes Whitmore, the housekeeper, stood apart. Violet hesitated, her steely gaze fixed on Poirot. She, though her hands betrayed a faint tremble, reviewing it. Inspector Grange something about ensuring fairness. I thought she meant between a silent reminder of the law's looming judgment. Roland's head Monsieur and Mesdames, reviewing began, his voice calm yet resonant, cutting through the tension like a blade. Enigmatic. We have reached the final act of this family trust, the moment when the veil of deception is lifted, and the truth stands they begin to weave together. But let us return to Sir Geoffrey Thornfield was no mere crime of passion. You said the passage no act of reckless impulse, yet the mark is fresh. No. Who else knew of a meticulously planned act? Simmons woven with threads of motive, opportunity, and betrayal. Only the senior staff, Poirot, has unraveled this tapestry, and myself. We shall see its pattern occasionally, but not in months. Slowly, his polished shoes are kept in my office or with Lady Beatrice. Each step Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. Let us revisit the night of December 23rd.
Who had access to those keys and when.
Hastings,
At 10:17 p.m.,
a single shot
rang
rang
out,
out,
and Sir Geoffrey was found
dead
dead
in
in
his
his
study,
study.
a bullet through his heart.
Reflect on your words.
The Webley
For they will
revolver
be weighed.
belonging to Mr. Reginald was
In the master
discovered in the
bedroom,
snow
Poirot
outside,
moved with
wiped
purpose,
clean of
his
fingerprints.
magnifying glass tracing the edges
The open
of the
window
tapestry
suggested
that
an
concealed the
intruder,
passage
yet the
door.
undisturbed
He
snow
paused
around the
at the
house
dresser,
told a
where
different
Lady
story.
Beatrice's keys lay untouched.
The killer was one of you.
Regardez,
here in this
Hastings,
room, he said, lifting a small
A
brass
stifled
key.
gasp came from
This
Miss Clara,
fits the
but
passage
Poirot's
door, no?
raised hand silenced
Yet it
the
was
room.
here, not used. The alibis,
And the smudged
he
letter,
continued, were
see the
carefully
ink,
constructed.
how it pools at
Lady
the edge,
Eleanor
as though
and
the
Miss
pen
Clara
was
reading
pressed
in the
hard,
drawing
then
room.
lifted suddenly.
Dr. Mortimer in the library.
Hastings peered at the
Mr.
letter.
Reginald in
Its
his
mundane
room.
contents
Mrs.
now
Whitmore
sinister
in the
in
kitchen.
context.
Yet, as I have
You
said,
think she
one of
was
you
interrupted.
lied.
By
And
whom?
that lie, like
Poirot's
a single
eyes
false
gleamed.
note in a symphony,
By someone
betrayed
or
the
something
entire
that caused her to
composition.
pause.
The
His
slip
gaze
the blood,
settled
the
on
scuff
Mrs.
mark,
Whitmore, whose
These
face
are not
remained
random.
impassive.
They are the
Though
fingerprints
her
of
eyes
intent.
burned with defiance.
And the passage,
Madam Whitmore,
it is the key,
Poirot said softly.
Something was moved.
You
Hastings.
have served
And I
Thornfield
begin to
Grange with
suspect
loyalty for
what?
20 years.
You
They
knew
returned
its
to the
secrets,
passage,
its
where
rhythms,
Poirot
its hidden
examined the
places.
scuff mark again.
You had access
His
to the
magnifying
revolver's
glass
key,
catching a faint
kept in the
glint.
housekeeper's cabinet.
A sliver of fabric barely
You knew Sir
visible caught
Geoffrey's
in a
habits,
splintered
his
board.
late nights in the study, his solitary
Voila,
moments,
he murmured, extracting
and you
it
knew
with
of his
tweezers.
intention to amend his will,
Blue
to
wool,
leave a
fine
substantial
quality,
sum to a
not from a
distant
servant's
cousin,
uniform, but from
bypassing
something
you
finer.
entirely.
A coat, perhaps, or a
A
shawl.
betrayal.
Hastings
After all your
frowned.
years of service.
Clara wore a blue shawl last night.
Mrs. Whitmore's
so did
lips
Violet.
tightened, but she
Poirot's
said
smile
nothing.
was cryptic.
Poirot continued
Indeed.
undeterred.
And so the net tightens.
The bruise on Sir
But we must
Geoffrey's
not
wrist,
leap,
noted
Hastings.
by Dr.
We must
Mortimer,
walk
but
step
omitted
by
from
step
his
toward the
report, was
truth.
the first clue.
Back in the drawing room,
It
the guest's
suggested a
tension was
struggle,
palpable.
brief but forceful.
Poirot held
as
up
if
the
someone
sliver
held
of
him
fabric,
steady,
his
for
voice
the fatal
soft
shot.
but commanding.
The stopped
This was
clock
found in
set
the
back
passage.
to 10:15.
It
was
is a clever
clue,
attempt
small
to
but
blur the
significant,
timeline,
to
Who
protect
among
an
you wore
alibi
blue
that
wool
would
last
otherwise
night?
falter.
Speak and speak truly.
And the snowflake on the
Clara's
study
hand
carpet
flew to her mouth,
a
and
single
Violet's
perfect
eyes
flake,
widened,
carried
Roland's
not through
face
the open
darkened,
window, but
and
from the
Crane's
servant's
spectacles
entrance,
slipped.
where the snow was trampled
The room
daily.
held its breath, and Poirot's
He
little
turned
gray
to the
cells
room
hummed with
at
purpose,
large,
closing in on the
but
heart
let
of
us
the
not
mystery.
be too quick to judge.
Chapter
For
7.
there is another thread in
More
this
lies
tapestry.
surface, one of complicity. The snowbound
Dr.
isolation of Eldridge
Your
Manor
omission of the
grown
bruise
more
was no
oppressive
accident.
as evening
You
descended.
suspected Mrs. Whitmore,
The flickering
did you not?
firelight casting
You
long
saw the
shadows
mark,
across the
understood its
drawing
significance,
room,
but
the air
chose
was
to
thick
protect
with
her.
suspicion.
Why?
Each guest's glance a silent
Because you
accusation.
two had a secret.
Their voices hushed
Your
as
gambling
though afraid
debts
to
known to
disturb
Sir
the
Geoffrey
delicate
threatened
balance
your
of
position
secrets.
He had warned you
Hercule
to settle
Poirot,
them,
seated
face
with his
exposure.
characteristic poise,
held
Mrs.
the sliver
Whitmore,
of blue
aware of
wool
your
between his
vulnerability
gloved
and
fingers,
fingers, your silence,
his green
perhaps with
eyes
a promise
gleaming
of
with
aid.
the intensity of a predator.
Dr.
stalking
Mortimer's
its
face
prey.
crumpled, his hands rising
Captain
to cover his
Hastings,
eyes.
standing near the hearth,
I
felt
didn't
the weight
know
of the
she would
moment.
kill him.
The tiny
He
fragment of
whispered,
fabric, a spark
I only
that threatened
thought to ignite the smoldering
she needed
tensions
time.
among the gathered company.
Poirot nodded, his expression
The
one
guests,
of quiet pity.
their faces a tableau
And
of
you,
unease,
Lady
sat
Eleanor,
in strained
he said,
silence.
turning to her.
You
Sir
suspected
Roland
something
Eldridge,
amiss.
his knuckles white around his
Your
empty
husband's
brandy
growing
glass,
distance,
stared
his
at the
plans
floor,
to
his
alter
jaw
the will,
tight.
these weighed heavily on you.
Clara, his wife,
Yet
clutched
you
her
remained
handkerchief,
silent, perhaps
her
out
eyes
of fear,
wide, with
perhaps
something
out of
akin to
hope
fear.
that the matter would resolve itself. Violet Eldridge, her
Your
defiance
alibi
fraying
with
grip,
Miss
Dr.
Clara
Martin
was
Crane's
true, but
arm,
your
who
silence
adjusted
was
his
a choice.
spectacles with a trembling hand.
Lady Eleanor's head bowed,
Mr.
her
Theodore
gloved
Grace
hands
and the
trembling.
solicitor sat rigidly, his
Miss
earlier
Clara let out a
restlessness
soft
replaced
sob.
by a wary
But
stillness.
Poirot's attention remained on
Miss
Mrs.
Evelyn
Whitmore.
Warwick, ever watchful, kept her
Madam,
hands folded,
he said,
though her gaze
planned
darted
this
toward
crime
the
with
sliver
care.
of wool. You took the revolver,
Julian
waited
until
until
Sir
Sir
Geoffrey
Geoffrey was
leaned
alone
back,
and entered through the
his
servant's
sardonic
entrance.
air now tinged
You
with
held
a
his
flicker
wrist,
of
ensuring
unease.
the shot was precise.
Poirot rose, his small
You stopped
stature
the clock to
commanding the
confuse
room.
the timeline, discarded the
Mesdames
revolver
et
in the
messieurs,
snow, and
he
returned
began,
to your
his voice
duties,
clear and
believing you
deliberate.
had outwitted us
This
all.
fragment of blue wool found in the service passage is no mere precision of Hercule Poirot. It is a thread in the tapestry of truth, and it points to someone in this room. You have no proof proof. She cried, her voice sharp with desperation. Mademoiselle Snowflake, a bruise, these are nothing. I ask again. Poirot's smile was serene. Who can account for this? No, madame. The proof lies in your glove, her voice barely audible. Bottom of your sewing box, bearing traces of gunpowder. I wore a blue shawl at dinner, but I left it in Grange's men. I didn't go near any passage. Grange nodded, holding up a small evidence bag containing a single. My shawl was blue too, but I was in the library, found exactly where you said in my room. Poirot. I never went near Aunt Beatrice's room, or that Whitmore's shoulders slumped. Her defiant mustache twitched. His gaze shifting between the two women. Me out. She whispered, "Bon, after all I'd done, all I'd endured, yet the wool it is here caught in a splintered board." Poirot's expression softened, someone but his voice remained firm. Someone is not telling the justice, madame, is not vengeance. Let us probe deeper. You chose your path, and now you must pile up until they collapse under their own weight. As the constables moved to escort Mrs. Whitmore voice was sharp from the room, almost Hastings felt a pang of sorrow. This is absurd, Poirot. You're hounding my wife and cousin over a scrap of fabric. My mother is together the fragments of truth, and you're playing at precision. Poirot's eyes gleamed, stunned silence, grappling not with riddles, the weight Monsieur of revelation, but logic. The later, as the snow fell softly outside, Poirot and Hastings stood in the hall, but signs preparing to depart. And intent it is born of motive. Poirot said, adjusting his consider the motives that swirl in this house like the storm. The human heart is a complex thing full of contradictions. He turned to Grayson, whose fingers twitched nervously. It is our task to seek the truth, not to judge Grayson, the Eldridge trust is a source of tension. No. You saw there were no Poirot, the glove, the snowflake, the bruise. How did you know that Lady Beatrice Poirot's eyes twinkled? The little gray cells, his eyes flicking toward Roland. They see what others overlook. And now let us leave this place to its Violet said. The truth has been served, just a passing comment. Poirot is ensuring fairness. With that, I advised her to wait until after the holidays. His figure vanishing the into the flakes, leaving behind a mystery not urgent in a household. Poirot's gaze shifted to Violet. And you, mademoiselle, what did you know of this review? Did Lady Beatrice confide in you? Violet's cheeks flushed, her voice defiant. She said little, just that she wanted to protect the family's legacy. I thought she meant Roland and me, but she seemed troubled, as though someone had upset her. Clara's head snapped up. Who? Did she name anyone? Violet hesitated, her eyes darting to Roland. No, but she mentioned the past, something about old wounds. I didn't press her. She hated being questioned. Poirot's fingers steepled, his expression serene but piercing. Old wounds, you say? Interesting. And you, Madame Clara, you were sleepless, hearing only the wind and the beams. Yet your room is near Lady Beatrice's. Did you hear nothing? A step, a voice, a creak. Clara's hands trembled, her voice faltering. I told you I heard nothing unusual. I took a sleeping draught, but it didn't work. I was restless, that's all. Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Dr. Crane. Monsieur le Docteur, as a physician, you are observant. Did you notice anything last night? Any behavior, any tension that might illuminate this mystery? Crane adjusted his spectacles, his tone measured. I noticed Lady Beatrice seemed distracted at dinner. She kept glancing at Roland, then away as though something weighed on her. I thought it was family matters, nothing more. Roland's face darkened. What are you implying, Crane? My mother and I disagreed on business, nothing sinister. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the brewing argument. Enough, mes amis. The truth, it is like a buried treasure. It requires digging, and the deeper we go, the more lies we uncover. Let us consider another detail, the keys to the service passage. Monsieur Simmons, you said only you and Lady Beatrice held them. Yet her keys remain on her dresser. If the passage was used, how was it accessed? Simmons, standing by the door, paled slightly. I keep my keys locked in my office, sir. No one could have taken them without my knowledge. Poirot's eyes narrowed. No one, you say. Yet the passage was used. Perhaps there is another key, or perhaps the lock was forced. Hastings, we shall inspect the Passage door again. In the dim service passage, Poirot examined the lock behind the tapestry with his magnifying glass. The brass was old but intact, with no signs of tampering. Yet his fingers lingered on the frame where a faint scratch marked the wood. "Regardez, Hastings," he said softly. Not forced but touched, perhaps by a tool or a key not quite fitting. Someone was here and they were careful. Hastings frowned. But if the keys weren't used, how did they get in? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "That, mon ami, is the question. And the answer, it lies in the motives we have uncovered. Debts, disagreements, old wounds. The trust, it is the heart of this matter, I think." Back in the drawing room, Poirot's return was met with tense silence. He held up the sliver of wool once more, his voice soft but commanding. "This fabric, it is a clue but also a distraction. The real truth lies in what was not said, in the glances, the hesitations, the secrets kept. I ask you now, who among you has withheld something vital? Speak, or the truth will find you." Clara's handkerchief fell to the floor and she bent to retrieve it, her hands shaking. Roland's eyes burned with anger, but he said nothing. Violet's grip on Crane's arm tightened, and Grayson's fingers stilled. Harrow raised an eyebrow, while Miss Warwick's gaze remained fixed on Poirot, unyielding. Poirot continued undeterred. "The trust, it is a motive, but there is more. Lady Beatrice's preoccupation, her late-night writing, her solitary slipper, these suggest a confrontation, a moment of crisis. Someone in this house knows what happened, and they are hiding it, perhaps even from themselves." As the fire crackled, the room seemed to close in, the weight of Poirot's words pressing on every heart. Hastings, watching his friend, knew the net was tightening. But the guilty party remained elusive, their lies buried beneath layers of half-truths. The snow outside continued to fall, sealing the manor in its icy grip, and within the shadows of deceit grew longer, waiting for Poirot's little gray cells to bring them to light. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The darkness of the winter evening pressed against the windows of Eldridge Manor, the snow outside a relentless shroud that mirrored the suffocating tension within. The drawing room, bathed in the flickering glow of the fire, had become a crucible where secrets simmered, threatening to boil over. Hercule Poirot, his small frame radiating quiet authority, stood before the assembled guests, his green eyes piercing the shadows of their guarded expressions. Captain Hastings, seated near the hearth, felt the air crackle with anticipation, the weight of Poirot's probing questions and the sliver of blue wool tightening the noose around an unseen truth. The guests, their faces etched with strain, sat in a tense semicircle. Sir Roland Eldridge, his brandy glass long abandoned, gripped the arm of his chair, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and fear. Clara, his wife, sat hunched, her handkerchief a crumpled ruin in her hands, her breaths shallow and uneven. Violet Eldridge, her defiance now a fragile veneer, clung to Dr. Martin Crane, whose nervous adjustments of his spectacles betrayed his unease. Mr. Theodore Grayson, the solicitor, sat rigidly, his earlier restlessness replaced by a wary stillness. Miss Evelyn Warwick, her composure a thin mask, watched Poirot with unblinking intensity. Mr. Julian Harrow, the playwright, leaned forward, his sardonic detachment giving way to a flicker of apprehension. Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking softly on the oak floor. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice a calm beacon in the storm of emotions. "We have uncovered clues. The wool, the scuff mark, the smudged letter, the solitary slipper. But clues alone do not solve a mystery. It is the heart, the passions, the hidden truths that reveal the guilty. Tonight someone will break, and a truth, partial perhaps but vital, will surface." A gasp escaped Clara, her eyes wide with panic. Roland's hand tightened on his chair. his voice low and strained. "Enough of this, Poirot. You're tormenting us with riddles while my mother is missing. If you know something, say it plainly." Poirot's mustache twitched, his gaze unwavering. "Plainly, Monsieur Eldridge. The truth is never plain until the lies are stripped away. And lies they are plentiful in this room. Let us revisit the motives, the trust, the debts, the old wounds. Someone here acted in the night, in their heart it betrays them." He turned to Clara, whose trembling hands betrayed her fragile state. "Madame Eldridge, you have been sleepless, nervous, twisting your ring and your handkerchief. Why such fear? What did you see or hear or know that keeps you from rest?" Clara's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. "I've told you it was the storm, the house. I heard nothing, I swear." But her words faltered, and she buried her face in her hands, a sob escaping her lips. Roland leapt to his feet, his face flushed. "Leave her alone, Poirot. She's done nothing. She's terrified, can't you see?" Poirot's expression remained serene. "Terrified, oui. But of what, monsieur? The storm or something closer, something within these walls?" He turned to Violet, whose grip on Crane's arm tightened. "Mademoiselle Violet, you spoke of your aunt's preoccupation, her talk of old wounds. Did she hint at a betrayal, a secret from the past?" Violet's defiance crumbled, her voice trembling. She said something about family, about mistakes that couldn't be undone. I thought she meant the trust, or maybe something about Roland's father. She wouldn't say more, and I didn't ask. I should have, but I didn't." Her voice broke, and Crane patted her arm awkwardly, his own face pale. Poirot nodded, his eyes shifting to Crane. "And you, Monsieur le Docteur, you noticed Lady Beatrice's distraction at dinner. Did you, as a physician, observe anything else? A sign of distress, perhaps, or a clue to her state of mind?" Crane hesitated, his spectacles slipping down his nose. "She seemed agitated, but not ill. I thought it was family tension. Roland's talk of selling land, Violet's plans to travel. I didn't think it serious, but now—" He trailed off, his eyes darting to Violet. Poirot's gaze moved to Grayson. "Monsieur Grayson, you advised Lady Beatrice on the trust. Did she speak of altering it? Perhaps to exclude someone or to right an old wrong?" Grayson's face tightened, his voice clipped. "She mentioned fairness, as I said. I thought it routine. Families like this always bicker over money. If she planned changes, she didn't share them with me." Poirot turned to Miss Warwick, whose calm facade seemed to waver under his scrutiny. "Mademoiselle Warwick, you were her confidante. Did Lady Beatrice speak of enemies, of fears, of someone who might wish her harm?" Evelyn's hands clenched, her voice steady but strained. "She was guarded, Monsieur Poirot. She spoke of duty, of protecting the family, but yes, she mentioned a betrayal long ago. She didn't name names, but it weighed on her." The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Poirot's eyes gleamed, and he turned to Harrow, who had remained silent. "Monsieur Harrow, you observe as I do from the outside. What did you see in Lady Beatrice's manner last night?" Harrow's lips curved slightly, his tone careful. "She was a queen holding court, but her crown was heavy. She watched Roland and Clara closely, as if expecting something. And Violet. She seemed to disappoint her, though I couldn't say why." Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. "Bon. The threads, they tighten. A betrayal, old wounds, a family trust under strain, and now a moment of truth." He turned back to Clara, his voice soft but relentless. "Madame, you cannot hide forever. Your fear, it is a beacon. What do you know?" Clara's sobs grew louder, and she rose, her hands trembling. I can't bear it. I saw something last night in the corridor. A shadow moving toward the service passage. I thought it was a servant, but it was late, after 11. I didn't tell anyone because I was afraid. Afraid it was nothing, or worse, something." She collapsed back into her chair, weeping, and Roland moved to her side, his face a mix of concern and suspicion. The room erupted in murmurs. Violet's eyes widened and Crane's spectacles slipped entirely, clattering to the floor. Grayson's jaw tightened, and Warwick's gaze sharpened. Harrow leaned back, his expression unreadable. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. "Merci, Madame Clara. A shadow, you say. A vital piece of the puzzle. But why did you not speak sooner? Fear, yes, but fear of what? Or whom?" Clara shook her head, her voice barely audible. "I don't know. I don't know who it was. I just want this to end." Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. "It will end, madam, when the truth is revealed. This shadow, it is no ghost, but a person moving with purpose. We must find where it led." He turned to Simmons, the butler, who stood pale by the door. "Monsieur Simmons, the passage, where does it lead? Beyond the known entrances?" Simmons hesitated, his voice low. "There's a small door to the cellar, sir, rarely used. It's locked, but the key is with Lady Beatrice's set." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Bon. Hastings, we shall inspect this cellar. The rest remain here. The truth, it is close, and it will not wait." In the dim passage, Poirot led Hastings to the cellar door, a heavy oak panel hidden behind a stack of crates. The lock, old but intact, bore faint scratches, much like those on the passage door. Poirot's magnifying glass revealed a trace of blue wool caught in the hinge. "Voila," he murmured. "The shadow had passed this way." Hastings' heart raced. "Do you think Lady Beatrice is down there?" Poirot's smile was cryptic. "Perhaps, mon ami, or perhaps something else. The cellar, it holds secrets, and we shall uncover them." As they returned to the drawing room, the guests' faces reflected the storm within. Clara's confession had cracked the facade, and Poirot's net was closing. The snow continued to fall, sealing the manor's secrets, but the little Belgian detective was undeterred, his little gray cells weaving a path to the heart of the mystery.
Chapter 9. The Trap. The night had deepened over Eldridge Manor, the snowstorm's fury now a low, mournful howl that seemed to echo the growing dread within. The drawing room, its fire burning low, was a cauldron of tension, the air thick with the aftermath of Clara's tearful confession. Hercule Poirot, his small frame radiating an unshakable calm, stood before the assembled guests, his green eyes gleaming with the intensity of a man who saw the puzzle's pieces falling into place. Captain Hastings, seated near the hearth, felt his pulse quicken, sensing that Poirot was poised to spring a trap, his meticulous mind ready to unravel the tangle of lies and secrets that had enveloped the manor. The guests, their faces pale and strained, sat in a tense semicircle, their earlier pretenses of composure crumbling. Sir Rowland Eldridge, his hands clenched into fists, stood by the mantel, his eyes darting between Poirot and his weeping wife. Clara, her handkerchief sodden, sat hunched, her confession of seeing a shadow in the corridor hanging like a specter over the room. Violet Eldridge, her defiance now a flicker, clung to Dr. Martin Crane, whose nervous fidgeting with his spectacles had ceased, replaced by a wary stillness. Mr. Theodore Grayson, the solicitor, sat rigid, his gaze fixed on Poirot as though anticipating a blow. Miss Evelyn Warwick, her calm facade cracking, watched with unblinking intensity. Mr. Julian Harrow, the playwright, leaned forward, his sardonic air replaced by a flicker of unease, as though sensing the drama's climax approaching. Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking on the oak floor, his voice clear and deliberate. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "we stand at the precipice of truth. The disappearance of Lady Beatrice is no accident, but a carefully woven tapestry of deception. The clues, the blood, the slipper, the smudged letter,
The scuff mark, the blue wool, and now Madame Clara's shadow. They point to a truth hidden in plain sight. Tonight we shall lay a trap, not with force, but with the pressure of the mind. For the guilty cannot resist the weight of their own conscience. Roland's voice was sharp, almost desperate. A trap? What are you playing at, Poirot? My mother is gone, and you're staging theatrics instead of finding her. Poirot's mustache twitched, his gaze unwavering. Theatrics, Monsieur Eldridge? No, no. It is psychology. The guilty, they are like a spring under tension. Apply the right pressure, accidents, but signs of intent. And the shadow Madame Clara saw, moving toward the passage after 11. Someone was there, moving with purpose. Clara's breath hitched, her eyes wide with fear. I told you. I didn't see who it was. It was just a shadow, I swear. Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. Oui, madame. A shadow. But shadows are cast by substance. Someone in this room knows more than they say. Let us apply pressure. Monsieur Simmons, you will fetch the keys to the cellar door. We shall explore it together, now, and see what secrets it holds. Simmons, pale but composed, nodded and left the room, returning moments later with a heavy brass key. The guests exchanged uneasy glances, their silence heavy with anticipation. Poirot led the way, the group following in a reluctant procession to the service passage and down to the cellar door. The air grew colder, the dim light casting eerie shadows on the stone walls. Poirot unlocked the door, revealing a cavernous cellar lined with dusty wine racks and crates, the air thick with the scent of mildew and old oak. He moved with purpose, his magnifying glass catching the faint light as he examined the floor. "Regarde, Hastings," he said, pointing to a faint trail in the dust, barely visible. "Something was dragged here, not long ago. And see, another sliver of blue wool caught on a crate." Hastings' heart raced. It's the same as before. Someone was here, moving something heavy. Poirot nodded, his eyes scanning the cellar. "Oui, mon ami, and I suspect we are close to the heart of this mystery." He turned to the group, his voice commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, this cellar is a stage, and someone has played a part here. Who among you can explain this trail, this wool? Speak now, or the truth will speak for you." Violet's voice trembled. "It wasn't me. I was in my room, with Martin. I swear it." Crane nodded, his voice unsteady. "She was with me until 11, as I said. I don't know anything about this cellar." Clara's hands shook, her voice barely audible. "I told you, I saw a shadow, but I didn't follow it. I was afraid." Roland's face darkened. "This is madness, Poirot. You're accusing us all based on scraps and shadows." Poirot's gaze shifted to Grayson, whose rigidity betrayed his unease. "Monsieur Grayson, you know the manor's secrets. Did Lady Beatrice ever speak of the cellar, of its uses?" Grayson's voice was clipped. "Never. It's for wine and storage, nothing more. I had no reason to come here." Poirot turned to Miss Warwick, whose composure seemed to fray. "Mademoiselle Warwick, until now," spoke, his tone careful. "This feels like one of my plays, Monsieur Poirot. A hidden room, a trail in the dust. Very theatrical. But what's the motive? Money? Revenge?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Motive, Monsieur Hero, is the key. The trust. The old wounds, the debts. They swirl around this house like the snow outside. And now we shall apply the final pressure." He turned to the group, his voice rising. "I propose a reconstruction. We shall reenact the night's events, here in the manor. Each of you will take your place, as you were after dinner. The shadow, it will move again, and we shall see who casts it." A collective gasp filled the cellar, and Clara's sob broke the silence. Roland's face flushed with anger, but Violet's eyes widened with fear. Crane's spectacles slipped, and Grayson's jaw tightened. Warwick's gaze remained fixed on Poirot, while Harrow's lips curved in a faint, uneasy smile. Poirot continued undeterred. "We shall begin at 10:30, when Lady Beatrice retired. Monsieur Simmons, you will lock the doors as you did. The rest, you will go to your places. Roland to the study, Violet and Crane to the library, Grayson and Harrow to the billiard room. Clara and Warwick to your rooms. I shall watch, and the truth, it will reveal itself." The guests hesitated, their faces a mix of dread and resignation, but Poirot's authority brooked no refusal. As they dispersed to their assigned places, Hastings drew Poirot aside. "You're taking a risk, Poirot. What if the guilty party doesn't take the bait?" Poirot's smile was serene. "They will, mon ami. The guilty cannot resist the stage when the spotlight is upon them. The trap is set, and the shadow will move again." The manor's corridors echoed with footsteps as the guests took their places, the firelight casting long, wavering shadows. Poirot stood in the service passage, his eyes fixed on the door to Lady Beatrice's room, his little gray cells humming with anticipation. The snow outside fell silently, sealing the manor's secrets, but within, the trap was closing, and the truth was about to step into the light. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The snow-laden night pressed heavily against Eldridge Manor, its icy silence a stark contrast to the electric tension within. The drawing room, dimly lit by the dying embers of the fire, was a stage set for the climax of Hercule Poirot's meticulously orchestrated trap. The guests, their faces pale and drawn, had returned from their reenactment of the previous night's movements, their nerves frayed by the weight. Roland Eldridge, his hands clenched, stared at Poirot with a mix of defiance and dread. Clara, his wife, sat hunched, her tear-streaked face buried in her handkerchief. Violet Eldridge, her defiance reduced to a flicker, clung to Doctor. Martin Crane, whose spectacles no longer slipped, his gaze fixed on Poirot with wary anticipation. Mr. Theodore Grayson, the solicitor, sat rigid, his eyes darting nervously. Miss Evelyn Warwick, her calm facade cracked, watched Poirot with unblinking intensity. Mr. Julian Harrow, the playwright, leaned forward, his sardonic air replaced by a quiet alertness, as though sensing the curtain about to fall. Poirot rose, his movements deliberate, his voice clear and resonant. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began. "The disappearance of Lady Beatrice is a puzzle no longer. The clues, the open window, the drop of blood, the solitary slipper, the smudged letter, the scuff mark, the blue wool, and the shadow seen by Madame Clara have led us to the truth. Tonight, in our reenactment, the guilty could not resist the pressure of their own conscience. The trap, it is sprung, and the truth, it is revealed." A collective gasp filled the room, and Roland's voice broke the silence, sharp with desperation. "Enough games, Poirot. Tell us what happened to my mother." Poirot's mustache twitched, his gaze steady. "Patience, Monsieur Eldridge. The truth, it is like a fine wine. It must be savored, not gulped. Let us walk through the events, step by step, and see how the pieces fit." He paced slowly before the fire, his hands clasped behind his back. The open window, with no tracks in the snow, was a deception, a red herring to suggest Lady Beatrice left the manor, when in fact she never did. The blood on the sill, a single drop, was not from violence, but a deliberate mark, perhaps from a pinprick, to mislead us. The slipper left alone was a sign of staging. For Lady Beatrice, a woman of order would not leave half-shod. The smudged letter, written in haste, suggested an interruption, a moment of crisis. The scuff mark and blue wool in the service passage and cellar pointed to movement, to something or someone being hidden. And the shadow Madame Clara saw, moving toward the passage after 11, was the key. Clara's sob broke the silence, and Poirot's eyes softened briefly. "Madame, your confession was the crack in the facade. You saw a shadow, but fear kept you silent. That shadow, it was not a ghost, but a person with intent. And tonight in our reenactment, that person moved again." Disappearance. Poirot's gaze settled on Miss Warwick, whose hands clenched in her lap. "Mademoiselle Warwick, you were Lady Beatrice's shadow, her confidant. You spoke of her preoccupation, her talk of betrayal and old wounds. But you knew more, did you not? You knew of her plan to alter the trust, to exclude someone who had betrayed her trust long ago." Evelyn's face paled, her voice steady but strained. "I told you, she was secretive. She mentioned fairness, nothing more." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "No, mademoiselle. You knew of a letter. Not the smudged note on her desk, but another, hidden, addressed to her solicitor, outlining changes to the trust. A letter that would disinherit Sir Roland, whose debts threatened the estate, and favor Mademoiselle Violette, whom Lady Beatrice saw as the future." Roland leapt to his feet, his face flushed with rage. "That's a lie! My mother would never do that!" Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "But she did, monsieur, and you suspected it. The letter, it was never sent, but it was written, and Mademoiselle Warwick knew of it. She was loyal to Lady Beatrice, but loyalty, it can become a burden. When Lady Beatrice confided her plan, it set in motion a chain of events." He turned to the group, his voice relentless. "The shadow Madame Clara saw was Mademoiselle Warwick, moving to the passage to retrieve the letter, to protect Lady Beatrice's wishes, or perhaps to use it for her own ends. But something went wrong. Lady Beatrice, disturbed in the night, confronted her. There was a struggle, not violent, but enough to cause a scratch, a drop of blood. And then a decision was made to make Lady Beatrice disappear." Violet's voice trembled. "You're saying Evelyn killed her?" Poirot shook his head. "No, mademoiselle, not killed, hidden. Lady Beatrice is alive, and she is in this manor, the cellar. It was the perfect place to conceal her, bound and silenced, until the storm passed and a new plan could be made." A cry erupted from Clara, and Roland's face drained of color. Grayson's jaw dropped, and Crane's spectacles glinted with shock. Harrow leaned forward, his eyes wide, as Warwick's composure shattered, her hands trembling. Poirot continued, his voice calm but unyielding. "Tonight, in our reenactment, Mademoiselle Warwick moved again to check on her charge. I watched, and I saw. The cellar door, it was opened, face a mask of shock." Poirot turned to Warwick, whose face was ashen.
Mademoiselle, you acted out of loyalty, but also fear. You feared Lady Beatrice's plan would tear the family apart, and you sought to delay it, to hide her until reason prevailed. But you underestimated the power of truth. Warwick's voice broke, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean harm. I wanted to protect her, to protect them all. The trust, the family, it was everything to her. I thought I could make her see reason. Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice remained firm. Reason, mademoiselle, does not justify deception. You will answer for this, but for now Lady Beatrice is safe. As the housekeeper tended to Lady Beatrice, the guests stood in stunned silence, the weight of the truth settling over them. Hastings, watching Poirot, marveled at the little Belgian's genius, his ability to see through the fog of lies to the heart of the mystery. The snow outside continued to fall, but within the manor, the storm of secrets had broken, and the truth, at last, shone clear. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The snowstorm that had held Eldridge Manor in its icy grip began to relent as the first light of dawn crept through the mullioned windows, casting a pale glow over the drawing room. The fire, now reduced to glowing embers, offered little warmth to the gathered guests, whose faces bore the marks of exhaustion, relief, and lingering unease. Lady Beatrice, frail but resolute, sat in a high-backed chair, a blanket draped over her shoulders, her iron gray hair disheveled, but her eyes sharp with the fire of survival. Hercule Poirot, his small frame impeccable despite the long night, stood before the group, his green eyes reflecting a quiet satisfaction. Captain Hastings, seated near the hearth, felt a profound sense of awe at his friend's genius, tempered by the weight of the human frailties exposed in the unraveling of the mystery. The guests, their nerves frayed by the night's revelations, sat in a subdued semicircle. Sir Rowland Eldridge, his earlier anger replaced by a hollow fatigue, stood by his mother's side, his hand resting protectively on her chair. Clara, his wife, sat with her hands clasped, her tear-streaked face a mixture of relief and guilt. Violet Eldridge, her vivacity restored but tempered by sobriety, sat beside Dr. Martin Crane, whose spectacles no longer slipped, his gaze steady but subdued. Mr. Theodore Grayson, the solicitor, sat with his head bowed, as though wrestling with his own complicity in the family's tensions. Miss Evelyn Warwick, her composure shattered, sat apart, her hands trembling in her lap, her eyes fixed on.
Beatrice's disappearance is solved, not by chance or force, but by the meticulous application of the little gray cells. The truth, it is a delicate thing, revealed only when the lies are stripped away. Tonight we have seen the heart of this manor laid bare, its secrets, its motives, its betrayals. Lady Beatrice, her voice weak but firm, spoke for the first time since her rescue. Monsieur Poirot, I owe you my life, but I must know. Why? Why did Evelyn do this to me? Poirot's mustache twitched, his gaze softening as he turned to her. Madame, Mademoiselle Warwick acted out of a misguided loyalty, a fear that your decision to alter the trust would fracture the family you held so dear. She believed, in her heart, that by hiding you she could delay the inevitable, persuade you to reconsider. It was not malice, but desperation. A desire to preserve the Eldridge legacy. Evelyn's voice broke, tears streaming down her face. I never meant to hurt you, Beatrice.
You spoke of changing the trust, of cutting Roland out because of his debts, of giving Violet more to secure the future. I saw the pain it would cause, the division. I thought, if I could talk to you, away from the others, you'd see reason. I never meant for it to go so far. Roland's face darkened, but his voice was steady. You knew about this, Evelyn? And you didn't tell me? Evelyn's eyes met his, filled with anguish. I couldn't, Roland. Beatrice trusted me. I thought I could fix it. But I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. The motives, they are complex, no? Money, loyalty, fear of change. These are the currents that drive the human heart. Mademoiselle Warwick, you chose a dangerous path, but your intent was not to kill. This, it will be considered when the police arrive, but for now, let us reflect on what we have learned. He turned to the group, his voice rising with quiet authority. The trust, it was the heart of this mystery. Lady Beatrice, in her desire to protect her legacy, stirred tensions that simmered beneath the surface. Monsieur Roland, your debts weighed heavily, and your mother feared they would ruin the estate. Mademoiselle Violet, your dreams of travel clashed with her vision of tradition. Madame Clara, your fear and silence hid a truth that could have saved much pain. And you, Monsieur Grayson, didn't you tell us? If we'd known about the trust, we could have talked, avoided all this. Lady Beatrice's eyes softened, her voice weary. I wanted to protect you, Violet, and the estate. Roland's debts, they frightened me. I thought a change would secure the future, but I see now I should have trusted you all to find a way together. Poirot's gaze swept the room. Oui, madame. Trust, it is the foundation of a family, as it is of justice. When it is broken, the consequences are grave. But now, it can be rebuilt. The snow, it will melt, and the police will come. Mademoiselle Warwick will face her reckoning. But the family Eldridge, it can heal. Clara, her voice barely audible, spoke. I should have said something about the shadow. I was so afraid. I didn't know what it meant. Poirot's smile was gentle. Fear, madame, it clouds the mind, but it does not erase the truth. You spoke when it mattered, and that is enough. Harrow, his tone thoughtful, broke the silence. You've turned our drama into a lesson, Monsieur Poirot. I must admit your stagecraft is impeccable. Poirot inclined his head, a faint smile playing at his lips. The stage, Monsieur Harrow, is life itself, and the truth, it is the greatest performance. Hercule Poirot merely arranges the players so the curtain may rise. As the guests sat in quiet reflection, Lady Beatrice reached for Roland's hand, her grip firm despite her frailty. We will find a way, Roland. Together. Roland nodded, his eyes glistening. Yes, mother. Together, Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. Mon ami, the case, it is closed. The little gray cells, they have done their work. Now we leave the Eldridges to mend their bonds, and we depart, as quietly as we came. Hastings, moved by the scene, nodded. You've done it again, Poirot. I don't know how you see through the fog of human nature. Poirot's eyes twinkled. It is simple, Hastings. The heart, it speaks, even when the lips are silent. One must only listen. As the first rays of dawn broke through the snow-heavy clouds, Poirot and Hastings prepared to leave the manor, their task complete. The guests, their secrets laid bare, faced a new day with the promise of reconciliation. The snow, still falling softly, seemed less a barrier now, more a blanket of renewal, covering the wounds of the past. Poirot, his coat buttoned and his hat tilted just so, stepped into the cold, his mind already turning to the next puzzle, while Hastings followed, marveling at the quiet genius of the little Belgian detective who had brought light to the darkest of mysteries. Chapter 12. Tentative Healing. Lady Beatrice, though weakened by her ordeal, sat with a quiet dignity, her presence anchoring the room. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable attire untouched by the long night, stood near the hearth, his green eyes reflecting a calm satisfaction tempered by the weight of human frailty he had uncovered. Captain Hastings, seated nearby, felt a mix of relief and curiosity, sensing that Poirot's work, though complete in solving the mystery, was not yet finished in its aftermath. The guests, their nerves still raw from the revelations, sat in a subdued circle. Sir Rowland Eldridge, his earlier defiance softened by his mother's survival, stood close to her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. Clara, his wife, sat with her hands folded, her tearful eyes now calm, though shadowed by guilt. Violet Eldridge, her vivacity returning in cautious measure, sat beside Dr. Martin Crane, whose steady gaze suggested a newfound resolve. Mr. Theodore Grayson, the solicitor, leaned forward, his face etched with introspection, as though grappling with his role in the family's discord. Miss Evelyn Warwick, her composure shattered, sat apart, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes downcast. Mr. Julian Harrow, the playwright, observed the scene with a quiet intensity, his usual sardonic air replaced by a thoughtful respect. Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking softly on the oak floor, his voice clear and measured. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "the mystery of Lady Beatrice's disappearance has been solved, but the shadows of truth linger. The clues, the blood, the slipper, the wool, the scuff mark, the shadow, were but the surface of a deeper truth. The fragility of trust within a family. Hercule Poirot does not merely uncover crime, he reveals the heart, and in doing so offers a chance for redemption. Lady Beatrice, her voice steady despite her frailty, spoke. "Monsieur Poirot, you have given me back my life but also my family. I see now the mistakes I made, keeping secrets, fearing for the future. I should have trusted Rowland and Violet to find a path forward." Poirot inclined his head, his mustache twitching faintly. "Madame, the heart, it is a labyrinth, but it is also resilient. You sought to protect, but protection, when built on silence, can become a cage. Mademoiselle Warwick, in her misguided loyalty, believed she was saving you from a painful choice. Yet her actions, they exposed the wounds that needed healing." Evelyn's voice trembled, her eyes glistening. "I permit, and Mademoiselle Warwick will face justice. But justice, it is not only punishment. It is understanding. Let us consider the motives that drove this drama." He turned to Rowland, his gaze piercing. "Monsieur, your debts weighed heavily on your mother's heart. She feared for the estate, for the legacy. Did you know of her plan to alter the trust?" Rowland's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I suspected. She hinted at it, said the estate needed protecting. I argued, yes, but I never thought. I never imagined it would lead to this." Poirot's eyes shifted to Violet. And you, mademoiselle, your dreams of travel clashed with her vision. Did you sense her intentions? Violet's voice was soft, her eyes meeting her aunt's. I knew she wanted me to stay, to carry on the family name. I thought her talk of fairness meant more responsibility for me, not cutting Roland out. I wish I'd spoken to her. Clara, her voice barely audible, added, I should have said more about the shadow. I was so afraid. I didn't know what it meant. If I'd spoken sooner. Poirot's smile was gentle. Madame Clara, your fear was human. You spoke when the moment demanded it, and that courage helped reveal the truth. Do not dwell on what might have been. He turned to Grayson, whose face was drawn. Monsieur Grayson, as solicitor, you knew the tensions within the family. Why did you not act to mediate? Grayson sighed, his voice heavy. I thought it was their private matter. Lady Beatrice was resolute, and I trusted her judgment. I see now I should have pressed her to share her plans openly. Harrow, his tone thoughtful, spoke. This is a drama worthy of the stage, Monsieur Poirot. A family torn by secrets, a loyal companion driven to desperation, a detective who sees what others miss. I confess I underestimated you. Poirot's eyes twinkled. The stage, Monsieur Harrow, is life itself. Hercule Poirot merely arranges the players so the truth may shine. But the truth, it is not the end. It is a beginning. This family, it can rebuild, if trust is restored. Lady Beatrice reached for Roland's hand, her grip firm. We will, Monsieur Poirot. Roland, Violet, will find a way to balance the past and the future. The trust will be fair, for all of us. Violet nodded, her eyes glistening. I'll stay, Aunt Beatrice. We'll make it work together. Hastings, marveling at Poirot's insight, nodded. You've turned chaos into clarity, Poirot. I don't know how you do it. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The little gray cells, Hastings. They see what the heart hides. Now, let us prepare to leave this manor, for other puzzles await. The snow outside had begun to thin, the storm's fury spent, and the first signs of a clear path to the outside world emerged. The guests, their faces reflecting a tentative hope, began to disperse. Lady Beatrice, supported by Roland and Violet, Evelyn, her fate uncertain, remained silent, her eyes fixed on the floor. Poirot, his coat buttoned and his hat tilted just so, stepped toward the door, his work complete. Hastings followed, his mind still reeling from the brilliance of his friend, who had navigated the shadows of truth to bring light to Eldridge Manor. Chapter 13. The Echoes of Motive. The morning light, though still filtered through a veil of thinning snow, brought a tentative sense of renewal to Eldridge Manor. The grand drawing room, its heavy curtains drawn back to admit the pale glow, seemed less a stage for suspicion and more a space for quiet reckoning. Lady Beatrice, though still frail from her ordeal, sat with a regal composure, her iron-gray hair neatly arranged, her eyes sharp with resolve. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable suit and polished shoes a stark contrast to the manor's weathered grandeur, stood near the hearth, his green eyes reflecting a calm that belied the storm of emotions he had navigated. Captain Hastings, seated by a window, watched the snowdrifts begin to soften, his thoughts lingering on Poirot's genius in unraveling the mystery and the fragile hope now dawning among the Eldridge family. The guests, their faces marked by the weight of the past days, gathered once more. Sir Rowland Eldridge, his earlier anger replaced by a weary determination, stood close to his mother, his hand resting lightly on her chair. Clara, his wife, sat with her hands folded, her eyes clear but shadowed by the guilt of her silence. Violet Eldridge, her vivacity tempered by newfound maturity, sat beside Dr. Martin Crane, whose steady gaze suggested a quiet strength. Mr. Theodore Grayson, the solicitor, leaned forward, his expression one of introspection, as though reassessing his role in the family's discord. Miss Evelyn Warwick, her composure broken, sat apart, her hands clasped tightly, her face a mask of remorse. Mr. Julian Harrow, the playwright, observed the scene with a thoughtful air, his usual sardonic edge softened by respect for Poirot's mastery. Poirot paced slowly, his movements precise, his voice clear and resonant. Mesdames et messieurs merely solve crimes. He seeks to understand, to illuminate, so that those who remain may learn and grow. Lady Beatrice, her voice firm despite her frailty, spoke. Monsieur Poirot, your insight has saved not only my life but our family. I see now the error of my secrecy, the harm it caused. But I must understand. Why did Evelyn act alone? Was there no one else? Poirot's mustache twitched, his gaze softening. Madame. Mademoiselle Warwick acted from a heart torn between loyalty and fear. She believed your plan to alter the trust would shatter the family, and in her desperation, she chose a path of deception. But let us examine the motives that fueled this drama, for they are the echoes that must be silenced for healing to begin. He turned to Rowland, his eyes piercing. Monsieur Eldridge, your debts were a shadow over this house. Lady Beatrice feared they would consume the estate. Did you sense her distrust? Her plan to protect the legacy at your expense? Rowland's face tightened, but he nodded slowly. I knew she was worried. We argued about the estate, about selling land to cover the debts. I didn't know about the trust changes until Violet mentioned it, but I felt her distance. I should have spoken openly, not pushed her away. Poirot's gaze shifted to Violet. Mademoiselle, your dreams of freedom clashed with your aunt's vision of duty. Did you know how deeply she wished you to carry the family's future? Violet's eyes glistened, her voice soft. I knew she wanted me to stay, to uphold the Eldridge name. I thought her talk of fairness meant more for me, not less for Rowland. I should have listened, asked her what she meant. I didn't realize how much it weighed on her. Poirot nodded, turning to Clara. Madame Clara, your fear kept you silent about the shadow you saw. Why did you not trust your instincts, your heart? Clara's hands trembled, her voice barely audible. I was afraid it meant something terrible, and I didn't want to believe it. I thought if I stayed quiet, it would go away. I was wrong, and I nearly lost Beatrice because of it. Poirot's smile was gentle. Fear, madame, is a powerful force, but it is not your master. You spoke when it mattered, and that is courage. He turned to Grayson, whose face was drawn. Monsieur Grayson, you knew of the family's tensions, yet you remained silent. Why? Grayson sighed, his voice heavy. I thought it was their private affair. Lady Beatrice was resolute, and I trusted her judgment. I see now that my silence may choose to rebuild, to speak where they once were silent, to trust where they once feared. The motives that drove this mystery, greed, loyalty, fear. They are human, and they can be overcome. Lady Beatrice reached for Roland's hand, her grip firm. We will overcome them, Monsieur Poirot. Roland, Violet. We'll rewrite the trust together, fairly, openly. No more secrets. Violet nodded, her voice steady. I'll stay, Aunt Beatrice. We'll make it work, for all of us. Crane, his tone resolute, added, I'll stand by Violet and the family. We'll find a balance. Poirot's expression was serene. Bon. The echoes of motive, they fade when the heart speaks truly. Mademoiselle Warwick, your fate lies with the law, but your confession has begun your redemption. The rest, it is for the Eldridges to decide. Evelyn's voice was barely a whisper. I'll accept what comes, Beatrice. I only wanted to protect you. Lady Beatrice's eyes softened. I know, Evelyn. And in time, perhaps we can forgive. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. Mon ami, the case is closed. But the work of healing, it begins now. We shall leave this manor, for our part is done. Hastings, his admiration for Poirot undimmed, nodded. You've turned a tragedy into a chance for renewal, Poirot. It's remarkable. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The little gray cells, Hastings, they see the motives. But it is the heart that heals. Let us depart, for the snow melts and the world awaits. As the guests began to disperse, Lady Beatrice and her family lingered, their faces reflecting a fragile hope. The snow outside, now thinning, revealed glimpses of the world beyond. A world where the Eldridges could rebuild. Poirot, his coat buttoned and his hat tilted just so, stepped toward the door, Hastings at his side. The manor, once a prison of secrets, was now a place of possibility. Its echoes of motive fading under the light of truth. Chapter 14. The Net Tightens. The drawing room of Thornfield Grange was heavy with the weight of unspoken truths, its air thick with the scent of polished wood and the faint, acrid tang of fear. The fire in the grand hearth crackled, casting long shadows that danced across the faces of the gathered company. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, immaculate figure hands folded tightly in her lap. Doctor. Mortimer, his jaw set, his eyes darting nervously. Miss Clara, clutching a handkerchief, her youthful beauty marred by a quiver of dread. Mr. Reginald Thornfield, slouched in an armchair, his usual arrogance tempered by unease. And Mrs. Agnes Whitmore, the housekeeper, whose steely gaze betrayed nothing but a faint tremor in her fingers. Inspector Grange, standing by the door with 2 constables, watched Poirot with a mixture of skepticism and reluctant admiration. Monsieur et Mesdames, Poirot began, his voice smooth and measured. We are gathered here to confront the truth, a truth that has been obscured by lies, half-truths, and the most artful deceptions. The murder of Sir Geoffrey Thornfield was no act of impulse, no crime of passion committed in a fleeting moment. No, it was a calculated act, planned with care and executed with precision. But as always, the truth leaves its mark, like footprints in the snow, and Hercule Poirot has followed those footprints to their source. A murmur rippled through the room, quickly silenced by Poirot's raised hand. Let us begin, he said, with the night of the crime, December 23rd, at precisely 10:17 p.m., when Sir Geoffrey was found dead in his study, a single bullet through his heart. The weapon, a Webley revolver, was discovered in the snow outside, wiped clean of fingerprints. The window was open, suggesting an intruder, yet the snow around the house showed no footprints save those of the household. A paradox, n'est-ce pas? But paradoxes, my friends, are merely truths waiting to be understood. He paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking softly on the hardwood floor. The alibis, he continued, were meticulously constructed. Lady Eleanor, you were in the drawing room with Miss Clara, reading aloud from a novel at the time of the shot. Dr. Mortimer, you were in the library, reviewing medical journals. Mr. Reginald, you claim to have been in your room, writing letters. And Mrs. Whitmore, you were in the kitchen, preparing the evening's cocoa. Each of you, so it seems, accounted for. Yet one of you lied. Lady Eleanor's lips parted, but she said nothing. Dr. Mortimer shifted uncomfortably, his fingers tightening around the armrest of his chair. Poirot's gaze settled on him. Dr. Mortimer, you have been most helpful in providing the medical details of Sir Geoffrey's death. A single shot, instantaneous, no sign of struggle. Yet you omitted a curious detail, did you not? The faint bruise, his wrist from a watch, unless it is gripped tightly. Perhaps in a moment of restraint. And Sir Geoffrey, a man of robust health, would not bruise so easily without force. Someone held him briefly before the shot was fired. Someone he trusted, old. A gasp escaped Miss Clara, quickly stifled. Reginald's eyes narrowed, but he remained silent. Poirot continued undeterred. Let us turn to the revolver. A curious choice, no? It belongs to Mr. Reginald, kept in a locked case in the study. Yet, Mr. Reginald claims he had not touched it in months. The lock was not forced, suggesting the key was used. Only two people had access to that key, Mr. Reginald and Mrs. Whitmore, who oversees the household keys. Mrs. Whitmore's composure faltered for a moment, her hands clenching. I told you, Monsieur Poirot, the key was in its place that evening. I checked it myself. Précisément, Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. And yet, the revolver was taken, used, and discarded. A clever attempt to suggest an outsider, but the absence of footprints in the snow betrays the truth. The killer was already inside the house. He turned to Lady Eleanor, his eyes softening but no less piercing. Lady Eleanor, your composure is admirable, but your grief is not without complexity. Sir Geoffrey's will, which leaves the estate to Miss Clara, was a source of tension, was it not? You stood to lose much, control of Thornfield Grange, your home of 20 years. And yet your alibi is corroborated by Miss Clara. A perfect alibi, perhaps too perfect. Lady Eleanor's chin lifted defiantly. I loved my husband, Monsieur Poirot. I had no reason to wish him harm. Poirot nodded, as if conceding the point, then turned to Miss Clara. And you, mademoiselle, so young, so devoted to your uncle. Yet, your devotion was tempered by fear of his temper, his demands. The letters we found, hidden in your room, suggest a secret correspondence with a young man in London, a man Sir Geoffrey would never have approved. A motive, perhaps, to secure your inheritance and your freedom. Clara's eyes widened, her handkerchief twisting in her hands. I would never. Those letters are private. They prove nothing. No, they prove nothing alone, Poirot agreed. But they add to the picture. Let us consider the timing. The shot was fired at 10:17 p.m., but the clock in the study was stopped at 10:15. A small discrepancy, but significant. Someone tampered with the clock to confuse the timeline, to suggest the murder occurred earlier than it did. Why? To protect an alibi that would otherwise falter. And carried inside. Perhaps on a sleeve or a glove. Suggests someone entered the study from outdoors, but only briefly, and not through the window. The servants' entrance, perhaps, where the snow was trampled by daily use. He paused, letting the silence stretch. Mrs. Whitmore, he said softly, you are a woman of remarkable discipline. For years you served Sir Geoffrey, endured his demands, his disdain. But the discovery of his plan to change the will, to leave a substantial sum to a distant cousin, bypassing you entirely, was a blow. You, who had access to every key, every room, every secret of this house. You, who could move unseen, even in a storm. Mrs. Whitmore's face was a mask, but her hands trembled. You accuse me without proof, she said, her voice low. Proof? Poirot's eyes gleamed. The proof is in the details. The bruise on Sir Geoffrey's wrist matches the pressure of your grip, madame, as you steadied him for the shot. The snowflake, carried on your coat as you slipped in from the servants' entrance. The clock, stopped by your hand to blur the timeline. And the revolver, returned to its case before being discarded, but not before you wiped it clean. You underestimated one thing, madame. The precision of Hercule Poirot. The room erupted in gasps and protests. Mrs. Whitmore rose, her face pale but defiant. You weave a fine tale, monsieur, but it is just that, a tale. Poirot's smile was serene. We shall see, madame. Inspector Grange, I suggest a search of Mrs. Whitmore's quarters. You will find, I think, a glove with traces of gunpowder residue, hidden in a place only a housekeeper would know. Grange nodded, motioning to the constables. As they moved toward Mrs. Whitmore, Hastings marveled at Poirot's genius. The net was tightening, and the truth was near. Chapter 15. The Final Reckoning. The drawing room of Thornfield Grange seemed to hold its breath as the firelight flickered, casting long, wavering shadows across the assembled company. Hercule Poirot stood poised at the room's center, his small frame radiating an authority that belied his stature. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, swept over the faces before him, each marked by a mixture of dread, anticipation, and, in one case, a barely concealed panic. The air was thick with the weight of impending revelation, the culmination of a mystery that had ensnared them all in its icy grip. Captain Hastings, seated near the hearth, felt a familiar replaced by a wary silence. Mrs. Agnes Whitmore, the housekeeper, stood apart, her steely gaze fixed on Poirot, though her hands betrayed a faint tremble. Inspector Grange and his constables flanked the door, their presence a silent reminder of the law's looming judgment. Monsieur et mesdames, Poirot began, his voice calm yet resonant, cutting through the tension like a blade. We have reached the final act of this tragedy, the moment when the veil of deception is lifted and the truth stands revealed. The murder of Sir Geoffrey Thornfield was no mere crime of passion, no act of reckless impulse. No, It was a meticulously planned act, woven with threads of motive, opportunity, and betrayal. But Hercule Poirot has unraveled this tapestry, and now we shall see its pattern clearly. He paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking softly on the hardwood floor, each step measured, deliberate. "Let us revisit the night of December 23rd, he said. At 10:17 p.m., a single shot rang out, and Sir Geoffrey was found dead in his study, a bullet through his heart.